Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are above replacement radio. And welcome to Above Replacement Radio. We're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Giant. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. 162 have officially come and gone. We have completed the 5th regular season in Above Replacement Radio history. We are on to postseason number 6, which is just remarkable and insane. I believe we were recording this an hour and 12 minutes shy of the 6-year anniversary of episode 1.
5-year anniversary, but yes.
5-year anniversary, yeah.
Fact.
Yep. 5-year anniversary.
Pandemic. That shows the test of this show.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Yeah, October 1st, 2019, Chris and I marched into the Springfield College radio studio after recording about literally 2 seconds of a test episode in Chris's dorm room before we found out we were allowed to relocate. I came on the air and said the Juan Soto Nationals will be what the Bryce Harper Nationals weren't, and that was and truly stardom was born for both of us on that day.
Yeah, for sure. We were talking Sean, I think it was Sean Manaea starting against the Rays that a day after that. We had Scherzer versus an abbreviated Brandon Woodruff start for the NL wildcard game. Talking Yankees Twins, that ended up in a sweep. You know, pre Twins curse breaking.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's pretty wild that after we did it for all 4 years of college and now we're here, very far apart in location, but not in spirit. But
No.
But
or mind or body.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it is pretty wild that we've made it pretty much over a full year after graduating. So
yeah,
pretty cool.
I've told this story before on the podcast, and I think I've told it probably multiple times in person off air, but we're being sentimental now, so I'm going to tell it again because 5 years is a milestone, so why not? But Chris and I were a month into our college tenures when we started the podcast, and we had gone through 3 or 4 weeks of classes together. We were in 2 of the same classes. We were in 2 of the same classes, both in our major, and we really hadn't spoken really a single word to each other before. After class one day, one of our friends asked Chris if he was gonna do campus media, and he thought about starting a radio show, and I just interjected and said, "Chris, you like baseball, right? I'll do a radio show with you." And you said, do you want to do Red Sox or the whole league? And I said, well, I can talk about the whole league if you can as well. And because neither of us knew each other or had talked to each other and had planned to do a radio show and eventually a podcast before, I don't think either person really knew what we were getting into, but we also didn't know what the other person was getting into, because obviously both of us knew our own levels of baseball knowledge. And finding someone to match it seemed pretty hard in both of our eyes, but we met in the dining hall that day. You came to me with a prep sheet that I think I still have the picture of to this day. And the first thing I read was Max Scherzer's ERA over his last 5 starts. And immediately I was like, oh my God, this is going to work incredibly well. How did we fall into this? And as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah. No, it was pretty sick. I do recall. I was sitting behind you in the intro to comm class, and I saw you on Fangraphs before, and I was like, okay, he looks into his stuff, that's for sure. But I'm, it maybe, I don't know if it reflects on airwaves, but I'm pretty introverted and, somewhat, I can appear standoffish when I first, get to know people. So I wasn't all the way out there as a freshman in college, but yeah, luckily we were able to push that together within the first month of classes and whatnot. And yeah, episode 326 now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Pretty wild.
Never forget the Periscope era.
Periscope era. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
never forget the OG Matt Brash interview, which I don't think there's any remains of that except for one clip.
Yeah, just one
Uh,
clip because
that
Periscope
went
is
that went
completely
like
gone.
marginally viral after he got traded from the Padres to the Mariners and eventually became, a very strong reliever. Um, what else?
Yeah.
What else happened in that span?
Um, in that span, I mean, that was, yeah, I can only think of like what happened. I mean, that was like Astro scandal, Mookie Betts
Yep,
trade, a crazy offseason, like Cole getting signed to the Yankees, Rendon to the Angels, Strasburg back with the Nationals. Like those were the big three. Yeah, like there was that was one of the craziest off seasons
it
ever,
was
and we covered it, but there's really no evidence of it now. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of the ARR feed on any of the platforms, it starts at episode 30 because we did 29 in the Springfield College radio station. I think 19 of which were on Periscope, which is no longer available, and then 10 of which are like nowhere on the internet. It was just for the radio airwaves, which I'm kind of happy about because we were probably messing up a good bit.
for sure.
Um,
We started in October of 2019. The Periscope era went until early March of 2020, and you'll never guess what happened after that.
Yep. And then history series. Yeah, and
Which
then
I still can't, like, 5 years later, I still can't believe we did that.
yeah, no,
Like,
it
actually
does
committed to it and finished it.
give you a reference point of how much leftover time there was during the lockdowns.
Because
Um,
I was spending legit 12 to 15 hours doing research for each episode, like
Absolutely, yeah.
within a week span, and most of that
Yeah,
was in one day.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it definitely gave us insight into what we were capable of research wise.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, it's definitely it's been a fun 5 years, and yeah, obviously no real signs of it slowing down or going away. I mean, we do one episode a week now, but that's only natural. Um but yeah, or during the postseason we might do a little bit more, try to get ourselves on the microphones a little bit more. But yeah, it's been a wonderful 5 years of talking baseball kind of whenever. And yeah, that continues today, as yeah, first day of playoffs come out the day of this recording, or excuse me, the first day of playoffs start the day this podcast comes out. There's a lot of action in Major League Baseball the past week. I think maybe most of the playoff field clinched in this past week. Some surprises, some, obviously non-surprises. What were the biggest kind of takeaways for you from this past week of baseball?
And the biggest surprise for me, not just in the weekend of baseball, but I hate to change gears here, but we also just didn't mention that we have Mark Simon on this.
Oh yeah, we do have Mark Simon.
Very nonchalant at this point. This is appearance number 4 for the defensive correspondent. That interview will be in later in the show, but yeah, we talked to him, had our annual little our annual little fireside chat before the postseason where we talk about defense, we talk about old stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it gave us some good insight on some of
Yeah.
the playoff teams that have particularly good defenses. Not actually a lot of not really any weak defenses in this playoff run here,
No, no,
which is
not at all.
interesting.
But my
Um,
takeaways from the actual games on the field was I really wish I wasn't at work today, and while at work also in a state where I could not watch the Mets and Braves first game at the very least because of blackout restrictions. I was watching on game day, and shout out to my friend Matthew, who is a huge Mets fan in our newsroom. I was giving him updates for the entire eighth and ninth innings because he was very hard at work today. Um, but yeah, what a game it was. Back and forth was awesome in the eighth and ninth innings. There, 6 runs in the top of the eighth, 4 in the bottom of the eighth, 2 in the top of the ninth. and Edwin Diaz came in and closed it out today. And yeah, the Mets and Braves both made the playoffs. They split their doubleheader today. The Diamondbacks are out. They just didn't play the best baseball in the last week or two. They lost 2 out of 3 at home to the Padres to close out the season. Very unfortunate way to go out, having to wait for someone else's results, but that's the way it went today. And Diamondbacks are missing the postseason. When was the last time both of the reigning pennant winners missed the postseason the next year?
I think I heard it on a broadcast. It was the 2007 season. The Cardinals and Tigers, I don't think made it the following year. So
That
that's
makes sense.
17 years,
Wow.
which is pretty crazy. But yeah, I mean, it makes a decent amount of sense because they were the 5 and 6 seeds in their respective playoff hunts, and we both predicted them to
We
be out of
nailed
the
it.
playoffs.
Yeah, actually, shout out to us for that one.
Yeah, good on us. But yeah, it's kind of weird to see the Diamondbacks out of the playoff picture considering how well they were doing throughout the whole second half. It's not like they didn't do particularly well the past week, but they didn't go fully ice cold, so it's kind of
No,
it is kind of weird
it's
to see
just
them
the
out
Mets
of
and
it.
Braves got hot.
Yeah, Mets and Braves got hot, and I think at 89 wins, I think it's got to be the most wins in the wild card series era, or the 12 team playoff format era. Most wins to be out of the playoffs, because I'm pretty sure, yeah, Mariners had 88 last year, and they missed it by that much. So I think the Diamondbacks now have the most wins for a non-playoff team in the 12 team format. So yeah, a little bit of bad luck there. Um, the One of the teams that maybe a month ago we would have thought would be a shoe-in to the playoffs was the Minnesota Twins, and they just completely flattened out. Pretty unbelievably, they lost 23 of their final 33. I mean, yeah, I mean, what were your thoughts on just the Twins completely the air just completely coming out of that balloon?
Yeah, it was incredibly depressing as someone who was very high on the Twins up until like mid-September when this bad stretch started. You really only have to go back a couple episodes to hear me say I still think the Twins are the best team in this division and they will win the division, because they were only like 3 games out at the time. And yeah, that one aged very poorly. Yeah, I mean, it was just a combination of things, right? The offense didn't do very well. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I know you pulled them up earlier. Do you want to give further context into the Twins?
Yeah. Collectively, just as a team, they fell a bit flat. Offensively, they had the third lowest OPS since August 25th, which was a 33 game span. Particularly individually, Royce Lewis really stands out as a guy who slumped during that span. In 121 plate appearances in those 33 games, he hit 179 with a 490 OPS. There were also some other strugglers. Ryan Jeffers hit 181 with a 498 OPS. Jose Miranda was at 200 with a 476 OPS. Only slugged 257 there, like really lacked on extra base hits. Edward Julian was at a 156 average with a 452 OPS over that span. And then pitching wise, they had I looked at it before, but I'm pretty sure the fourth worst ERA in baseball. So not only were they not hitting, they weren't pitching well. Everything was going really wrong over in Minnesota. And yeah, I mean, we both thought they were pretty, like, almost overwhelming favorites to win that AL Central heading into the year. Obviously, the Guardians surprised us, but really no reason why the Twins shouldn't have made the playoffs this year.
Yeah, no, this will be looked at quite comfortably as a major missed opportunity for the Twins as a team. And there are a lot of, I think, fingers that you can point in various different directions. I mean, ultimately, the team had it right in front of them and they didn't execute. That's just fundamentally what it is. But also, I think there's a lot to be said for ownership and how they handled the last year. The Twins in 2023 had one of the the most successful season that the franchise has had in over 20 years, right? They won a playoff game for the first time since 2000, I believe, 4. They won a playoff series for the first time since 2002. Like, things were looking up for the Twins. They were a very fun, exciting team. They cut payroll by $35 million. They let go of their ace pitcher from the previous year. Add anyone, and they didn't do anything at the trade deadline either. The only person they added because they said that they couldn't afford to take on another contract. So you got to ask yourself what exactly happened there. How did the Twins suddenly not have any money? Like, I know that the diamond stuff was hindering them, the whole bankruptcy with Bally Sports, and but there are plenty of teams that had that same thing happen. Look at the Padres, right? Like they suffered the same issue. They also suffered their owner tragically passing away, and yeah, they had to shed some salary, but when it came down to it and when it was time to win, they went out and got pitchers. They got relief pitchers. They got starting pitchers. They got people that they needed to put them over the edge, and that's exactly what happened. And that's the difference between the Padres and Twins here in terms of where they were at the trade deadline, how they executed, and how they finished.
Right. Yeah. At trade deadlines, especially given that only 2/3 of the season is left, you're never really splurging on cash or for contracts, especially like a lot of the times you're just getting additional people like relievers, maybe increasing your payroll by at most $10 million, which, for MLB owners, not a whole lot. But yeah, no, it's unfortunate. There's a lot of different factors that went into their downfall. I kind of, given what their roster looks like, and I think they have a decent amount of players locked up. I expect success from them next year, but this year is definitely a bit of a blown opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is, yeah. I mean, there's plenty of places you can shift blame to, like I mentioned earlier. Yeah,
Right.
there's no other really way of putting it.
Yeah, some slight underperformance or injury troubles were a little bit of a thing, especially later in the year. You had a lot of guys on the IL. I know Kepler ended up on the IL. Miranda ended up on the IL. Carlos Correa only played 86 games this year. Byron Buxton, and obviously he played 102 games, and that seems like a lot. But still obviously missed 60 games in a very good year rate statistic wise for him. So yeah, I mean, but the Twins have dealt with that before. They've dealt with injuries before, and they've won before. And but yeah, not this year. But yeah, I mean, allowed for the Tigers to get in, which it's a little bit more fun. Even if they're maybe a little bit less talented. But yeah, anything more on the past week of baseball before we go into what's sort of an annual thing now?
Yeah, let's well, I think we should do real quick just an ode to the Oakland A's.
Oh yeah.
Um Obviously a very difficult week. I don't know how much you got to watch of some of the final games. I wasn't able to watch the final game in the Coliseum. That's going to have to be an off-season watch for me, but I did watch the end of the last game of the Oakland A's in Seattle. The team lost. But the story wasn't about uh we've said this about the A's this entire year, but the story is not about the team on the field. It's not about the wins and losses. It's about what's happening to this team at the end of this year, all of the sort of politics around that, and the tragedy of it, the sadness of it, the disappointment of it, and I think A's fans handled things really nicely. They made it seem like as much as it was a sad thing, and it was a sad thing, but they gave us reasons to smile this week. I think it's hard not to watch the last out at the Coliseum, to see the crowd that was in the ballpark that day and not have a smile on your face with everything that you were seeing. Same thing went with the crowd that was behind the A's dugout in Seattle and chanting "Let's go Oakland" at the end. It was a very heartwarming scene, but also a very heart-wrenching scene.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, seeing that packed house was beautiful, and shows you, what that city is capable of when you give them something that they want to watch.
Mhm.
Obviously. Yeah, like, it was something they wanted to watch, so they came out. And yeah, I think everything with the John Fisher and Las Vegas situation has been said. Wanted to give a shout out to like Dallas Braden was the
Yes.
best. He was the best, narrator of all of this and the last day in Oakland. He's a Stockton native, right in the Bay, right in Northern California. Obviously an Oakland A's pitcher and had one of the greatest moments in Oakland A's history with his perfect game on Mother's Day. And him ending up in the booth for that day, it couldn't have been more perfect. And he's such a great orator, something I'm, like almost jealous of as someone who, gets on the microphone. Just and when he gets down to brass tacks and he's serious, you're hanging on every single word. And he was just a great soundtrack of that final day in Oakland. And I'm really glad that the Oakland fans were able to, have him be their representative in that final day.
Yeah, Dallas was the what he said, on the microphone, but also just the way that he interacted throughout the week. There were videos of him on Thursday at the final day of the Coliseum. He was in the parking lot at like 7 a.m. He was at tailgates. He was hanging with fans, doing meet and greets, signing stuff. On Sunday, an hour before the game, he went down behind the A's dugout to thank all the fans. He was giving them hugs. He was, doing everything that you do in that case. And yeah, he was incredibly generous with the way that he went about himself. And what was, just as tough a week for him as it was for everybody else. Like he's going through the same stuff that every A's fan is going through, and he was holding it together strong, being a leader for that group, telling them it's going to be okay. And we don't know what the future holds. We really don't, because they don't have funding for a stadium in Vegas. They don't really have definitive stadium plans in Vegas. And to be honest, like people don't remember this, but they literally didn't have to leave now. They could have waited until they had a stadium to Vegas, but they're insisting on going to Sacramento for no reason. Like they're volunteering to move an hour away to play in a worse ballpark, an objectively worse ballpark by every stretch imaginable. If you put the Oakland Coliseum in Sacramento, they're still like they're rushing to play there. It's not about the stadium. It's about not being in Oakland, unfortunately, is what it is right now. It doesn't really make any sense logistically, but it's a situation we're in. And if I'm being honest, I'm not ruling out a potential return to Oakland someday, because there is still so much that needs to be done. I can't imagine they're going to get the public funds in Vegas.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
it might
talk
just be a
about
necessity to come back to Oakland.
Yeah. Like people talk about, first of all, like getting the public funding to build any stadium is incredibly difficult, even if it's a team that the city likes. Look at Kansas City, right? Kansas City has two teams that they show up for when they're good. They have a team that's in the middle of a dynasty right now, and both teams just proposed like a new stadium site for both teams in the same area with a big stadium district downtown, and the public rejected it. Like if you can't get it in that scenario, how are you going to get it in a city that doesn't have any attachment to the team, that doesn't exactly have a good history of supporting teams that come in from other cities? How are you going to do that? I don't know. I really don't.
Yeah, right. It's an even weirder scenario, because there's no, like, it's like with Montreal and Washington, I'm sure it was definitely they knew it was definitely going to be successful, and it was, to be fair. Whereas like this, we have no idea. It's entirely speculation, and nothing's shown that it's going to be a success yet.
Mm-hmm. I'm very interested to see, because John Fisher has indicated like payroll is going to go up now that we're leaving Oakland. Like, I just need to know what player that has options is voluntarily signing in Sacramento. And maybe we're going to get those answers this offseason. Maybe we're not. Actually, maybe we will get those answers this offseason. And the answer is really not that many people. But I don't know. I can't imagine, first of all, like if the A's aren't going to make the top dollar offer on premier free agents, not like Juan Soto premier free agents, but guys that you signed to multi-year deals, I feel like it's going to have to take a lot of convincing to sway people into playing in a minor league ballpark for the foreseeable future, because they don't really know when they're moving to Vegas, right? Like if you sign a 5-year deal, you might be playing in Sacramento for 5 years.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Guess what? There's probably another team that's going to offer something, maybe not as much, but similar. And that's assuming the A's are willing to pay the top dollar, which I have a hard time believing that one too.
Yeah, and then California taxes and whatnot, so
That
they
too.
do
Yep.
have to be even more than
That
the
yeah.
highest price. Yeah, no, it's yeah, like it's pretty wild. So much is up in the air that yeah, it's not only is it sad, but it's very confusing as well. Because
It
there's
makes
no
no
clear
sense.
path out of this. Whereas yeah, like many other many other moves have happened in franchises. Most of them make a good amount of sense, to be honest. But yeah, no. Hopefully it can end up like a Cleveland Brown situation. I think there was no football team in Cleveland for like 2 years, and then one formed. Whereas the Athletics, maybe they could just come back. Hopefully, I don't know.
Yeah.
It would be difficult, but uh, moving to Vegas is difficult. Anything more before we get into our correct and incorrect narratives?
Yeah, I think I have a little bit more on this A's thing. MLB has talked about expansion for so many years at this point, and at this point, it does feel like a when, not if type of thing. We just don't really know where. Assuming that the A's aren't coming back to Oakland, I have a hard time believing that it's not going to be a clear competitor with a different owner. Because one, I think, people that have that much money uh, like to be liked. Sometimes they don't care. Sometimes they really like to, have this big status and have all this power and also have people like them. And if you have the money and you buy the A's and you do the things that they wanted, you will be a hero in the city. So I think there's a demand and on that front of someone wanting to invest in Oakland. And, I don't know how Rob Manfred feels about the whole situation because it really feels like he's had John Fisher's back in this whole thing, like more than some would say. But he's not commissioner for what? Until for like and only for 5 more years, right?
Yeah, I think he announced like this was his last run, or like
It's
it
like,
renews
yeah, I
maybe
think it's
every
after like
5 years.
2029 or something
Yeah,
like that. So
2029, I
like
think.
I do feel very optimistic that this is not a true goodbye to Oakland. It's sad to see a franchise that has meant so much to people for 57 years go. I have to imagine there are a lot of people in Oakland that have sworn they will never root for another team, even if there was one that came back to Oakland. It's A's or nothing. I do think that there's a there whether it be an expansion franchise that we see baseball come back to the city of Oakland where it belongs.
Yeah. There's a little bit of optimism there, but it just yeah, obviously it sucks that it's going to be a waiting game, and a lot's still up in the air, despite
And
all
if I
this.
really wanted to make this a hot take, I would say an expansion franchise in Oakland will win the World Series before any team owned by John Fisher.
That I think I can get on that bandwagon.
That's got to be like a dream scenario, right?
Pretty much, yeah. If they just like D-backs it and win it
Yep.
their fourth
Yep.
year.
Absolutely. Or like Marlins it, yeah.
Oh yeah, Marlins, yeah. Fifth, yeah, I think they did it their fifth year.
Their fifth year,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that was the week in baseball. Yeah, it was kind of like we didn't have any big retirements this year, but
Charlie
oh,
Blackman.
Charlie Blackman, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Blackman, but this was like the big like sad thing to happen, or farewell
Hmm.
thing to happen in
Yeah.
baseball.
And I think a large part of that is because he spent his entire career with one team. Like I think
True.
that definitely adds an element to it of like this guy, dedicated his entire career to the Colorado Rockies,
Yeah, which
and good on him for doing it because not
yeah,
everyone is strong enough to bear that burden.
yeah,
But
never
Charlie
forget
Blackman,
his 2017 season. That was pretty
never
dope.
forget his 2017.
Um but yeah, so yeah, last year Daniel had the idea of starting um a little bit of a reflection segment for us where we come into the season probably for like 5 months or at least 3 months. We're giving takes. January to March, it's take time. That's what
Take
we're
time.
doing. It's we're saying, especially this year we started the positional rankings, so takes all over the place, just more than we can give. But but yeah, so we go over our best correct narratives and worst incorrect narratives. We're doing that each year. Last year we did 3 correct, 3 incorrect. This year we're doing the same. So yeah, like for example, last year, one of my correct narratives was my continued non-belief in the Angels, and one of my incorrect takes was the Orioles didn't do enough in the offseason, and we're gonna finish in last place. That obviously did not happen. They won 101 games and won the AL East. So yeah, what is your number one? We start with the correct because it's always funnier to end with the incorrect.
Yeah.
What was one of your correct takes from 2024?
Yeah, one of my correct takes. One thing that we introduced this offseason was the current and Gianta 50s. We
Mhm.
both released top 50 player lists. We both did a top 10 positional list. So I think a lot of narratives can come from that. But my favorite ranking on the current 50, the correct ranking, Shohei Ohtani at number 3. I quite literally could not have nailed it any better. Shohei Ohtani finished third among all players in F4 this year. He finished with 9 F4. He only ranked behind Aaron Judge and Bobby Witt Jr. And I know that that doesn't sound like too hot of a take because, well, of course, it's Shohei Ohtani. Like, of course, you got to have him high on the rankings. Well, not everyone did. MLB had him at 4, which I still was more optimistic on him than they were. The 2 other people that I use for reference other than MLB Network are Chris and friend of the show, Foolish Baseball. Both of you guys put him at 9, I believe. Uh,
I put him at 12.
you put him at 12. Baseball put him at 9. So I had the objectively correct ranking of Shohei Ohtani as well as Aaron Judge too, but that one feels a little less like I told you so because it was a pretty easy take to have. So yeah, I picked Shohei third overall. Despite only being a DH, a lot of what I said was I still think he's a top 3 player just as a DH. And that's exactly what he was this year. So it was very cool to see he did it in such a special way, of course, going for 60 stolen bases and 54 home runs.
Yeah, I think he ended with 59 stolen bases, so it wasn't really that. I don't
Yeah, he
really
might
think
have,
that's
but
special.
still pretty good.
Um,
And
yeah,
yeah, I was
no,
correct.
pretty wild. Yeah, and to like in order to be a top 3 player, as a DH, you have to really go above and beyond, and that's exactly what he did. Put up
Yeah,
9 WAR, 9.1 WAR
absurd.
as a DH, and it took some historic seasons by Judge and Witt to
He could have
surpass him.
easily led the league in B war or in F war
Yeah. Oh yeah,
under like
exactly.
normal circumstance in like most years.
Yeah, exactly. Last year he would have. I think Acuna topped out
Oh
at
yeah, like
8.3.
8.3, I think 8.4 maybe.
Yeah. So Shohei would have won last year if he had this year. Pretty wild. My first correct narrative, it's on the weaker side. My other 2 are a little bit stronger, but my first correct narrative is that not as many things would go right for the Cincinnati Reds as they did in 2023. And I don't think too many people were super high on them. But I think people were higher on them than I was. I had the Reds finishing 4th in the NL Central, and that's exactly where they finished. And that resulted in the firing of their manager. So obviously they didn't like their direction they were going in. I personally had a lack of faith in their sustainability, partially because of run differential, partially just I didn't believe in some of the tools they had, and ultimately, I think they actually got a little bit unlucky in the run differential department this year. But ultimately, just results wise, I think they won 77 games, which was a little bit disappointing for a lot of people out there. In terms of how my prediction compared to others, all 6 of the CBS sports writers on their prediction panel had the Reds above 4th, and Ben Verlander, who's like really the only full standings predictions person I
I thought
could
you were gonna be
find,
like really the only source that I trust.
really the only guy I trust. Ben Verlander had them winning the division. So yeah, there were obviously some folks that were really optimistic about the Reds. I think most people didn't have them as a playoff team, but I had them near bottom of the division, which is what ended up happening. So that was my first correct narrative. What's your second correct narrative?
Yeah, my second correct narrative, I think most publicly paraded on for the last 2 or 3 weeks on this show, and that was my American League sleeper team, the Detroit Tigers. I had them I had them finishing as the 6th seed in the American League, and they did exactly that. Yeah, I mean it definitely didn't take the road that I thought it would take. I thought that Spencer Torkelson would be a more consistent piece for them throughout the year, and that he would be kind of one of the on-field leaders behind Riley Green. Um, and yeah, they were awesome. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. They made the playoffs. They kind of shocked the world to do it, right? Like they had playoff odds below 1% in early August. Still got there though. They finished with what, 86 wins, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I mean, and hey, a lot of people were correct on this, but when people thought of like cool AL Central sleeper teams, they only thought of the Royals. I instead only thought of the Tigers, and I was half wrong, half right, but I think the half right was the one that not as many people went with. So I'm very happy with what the Tigers did this year. They fulfilled my prophecy of being the 6th seed, and for that reason, they were my second correct narrative.
Yeah, Tigers were pretty much definition of a sleeper team. I labeled them as a trap sleeper team, and I was right for about 5/6 of the season,
Yeah.
and then it was flipped right upside down. And my take was turned into a bad one. My second correct narrative, I I took a decent amount of L's on the, either positional ranks
So did I.
or the Gianta 50. However, this one I'm decently proud of. I said that Francisco Lindor was a top 10 player for 2024. And most people were not really close to that. I personally loved his overall consistency and completeness as a player coming into the year. He was coming off 2 straight 6-win seasons, or at least what the F4 was at the time. I know they changed it a little bit. It makes it a little bit weird sometimes. They change it like in the 2 years after or whatever. However, in terms of why I liked Lindor this year, I was a little bit inspired by increases in average exit velocity and barrel rate, and that mostly continued, or at least stayed up. And his OPS plus increased by over 15 points. He ended up finishing 6th in F-WAR and top 10 among all players in B-WAR. I don't know exactly where his rank is going to be there, because he was pretty close with I think Jose Ramirez and Ketel Marte in the B-WAR department. So he might actually move up to 8th, because he went 2 for 5 with a home run today. But he was definitely top 10 in B-WAR among all players, and 6th in F-WAR, which I value a little bit more. So I think I was more right about it than most of the other publications. ESPN had him at 27. MLB Network had him at 25. Baseball America had him at 20. CBS Sports had him at 15th, and Foolish Bailey had him at 15th. Pitcher List was the only other list I could find who also had him top 10, and he was ranked 10th on their list. So most publications and most lists did not have Lindor top 10, but he's going to end up probably being an MVP runner-up, which kind of proves him to be a top 10 player this year. And it also helped. People will agree with that more, because he was clearly the leader on a winning team that definitely needed his success to end up going to the playoffs. So that definitely helps out a little bit too, in terms of taking the victory lap. What is your third correct narrative?
Yeah, my third and final correct narrative. This goes back to the current and Gianta 50s. This one seems like I didn't get it right enough, but I was closer to the truth than anyone else. I had Bobby Witt Jr. number 10 on my current 50, and yeah, Bobby Witt Jr. was way better than the 10th best player in baseball this year, but no one else was in quite the same echelon as my optimism for Bobby Witt Jr. I was kind of all in on him. I put him above Francisco Lindor in my rankings, and I was wrong on Lindor in my own right. I put him at 18, which is a bit disrespectful. But Witt over Lindor was a tough decision, but it was one that I felt strong in. And as good as Lindor was, I think that I got it right by saying that Bobby Witt Jr. was above him to start the year. I didn't have him above Corey Seager, which was wrong, but to have him top 10 in the league, yes, it doesn't seem like I did it justice, but like I said, I was closest to the pin out of everyone. So I'm very happy with Bobby Witt Jr. this year. Obviously, he kind of nailed everything. I went back and listened to my analysis of him, and yeah, I mean, I didn't predict a 10-win season, but I mean, in terms of what I believed his skill set was and how sustainable it was, I kind of nailed it, and I'm very proud of that. So shout out to Bobby Witt Jr.
Yeah, for sure. I had him 19. I think I know Foolish Bailey had him, I think 18, and
Hmm.
um MLB Network might have had him 19. So you were definitely ahead of everybody there. And yeah, I was so surprised when you put, or almost offended when you put him above Lindor, but it ended up being correct. Even though Lindor had one of his best seasons
Yeah,
ever.
I can.
Right?
I was to say, if you showed me that prediction and said, by the way, Lindor is going to put up 7.5 F4 this year, I would have been like, oh God, I was devastatingly wrong on that.
But no, Witt lapped him.
Yeah.
Which shows how good he was this year. Um, yeah, so uh my next correct narrative, I share this take with you. But and it's not even like I don't think it was a hot take, it just ended up being kind of a perfect prediction. I said, you and I basically said the Marlins would regress into a last place season. We were alarmed by pitching injuries, and I was alarmed by the run differential last year. Their Pythagorean win-loss had them at 75 wins last year. They won 84. So obviously there's some fluky things going on with the one-run games and whatnot. They ended up this year with the worst record in the National League. They were selling, they were selling in May. I mean, they traded Luis Arraez in May, so that kind of shows you the direction they were in. And in terms of how this prediction compared to others, 5 of the 6 CBS sports writers predicted the Marlins to finish above last place. Ben Verlander had them winning 84 games to land in third place, and Fangraphs actually
Off.
had them with the third highest playoff odds in the NL East. So even Fangraphs was higher on them than the Mets. But I was not buying into that. Yeah, I figured, with Alcantara out and Perez was originally just injured and not having Tommy John surgery. Um, and having Perez out, Braxton Garrett started the year on the IL. I was very much not bought in on the Marlins, and it showed this year. They lost 100 games, or maybe even more than that. But I think they
I
lost
think they
100
went
games.
61 and 101, or maybe that
Yeah,
was the Rockies.
yeah, they lost
No, they went 61 and 101, I think.
62 and 100.
Damn it.
Rockies had
We're
101
61
losses.
and yeah. I knew one of the Marlins and Rockies was 61 and 101, and one was 60 and
Oh,
100.
so my mistake. I
62 and
said they
100.
ended up with the worst record in the NL. The Rockies did. The Marlins were better than them by 1 game. So, but they
Yeah,
were they were
huge.
last place. They were last place in the NL East, which is what we both predicted. So yeah. Now on to the incorrect narratives. What is
Yep.
the first one you would like to share?
Yeah, I paraded myself about the Detroit Tigers earlier. However, I was devastatingly wrong on the rest of the AL Central minus the White Sox. Because I mean, let's be real, that doesn't count. Predicting the White Sox to be bad. Um, yeah, I was fully in on the Minnesota Twins. I thought comfortably they were the best team to win the division. I thought they were even a sleeper World Series team. We talked to Mark Simon later in the episode. He was nice enough to have Chris and I participate in his preseason predictions game with some very smart minds in and around baseball media, and I mean, you were both very grateful to have the opportunity to take part in. But one of the questions was, who is your World Series team, and pick a second team to win the World Series. My second team was actually the Minnesota Twins. I was all in on this team. I really liked, even with the payroll cut, I thought they had a lot of momentum going forward. From the previous year, Pablo Lopez was my Cy Young pick. I thought this team was going to be phenomenal. I thought they would even be good for an AL Central team, and not just be feeding off of the bad teams in their own division. Um, and like we mentioned earlier, they missed the playoffs. They finished fourth. And that takes us to the actual champions, the Cleveland Guardians. I had them finishing third, just being kind of underwhelming. I think I had very much like a replica of their 2023 season in mind. Um, Oddly enough, they had a lot of success, but they didn't do it the traditional Cleveland Guardians way, right? Like they did it by briefly hitting for power, which was pretty insane. Their starting rotation strongest point. The bullpen was phenomenal and the best in the league, and that is a little more in tune with what we're used to. But I mean, that was by far their strongest point this year. Yeah, I was wrong on this team. I thought they were going to be a middle of the pack, right around 500 type of team, and they were basically wire to wire. It felt like. I mean, it wasn't literally that because the Royals did catch them there late in the season, but no, the Cleveland Guardians were just phenomenal throughout the entire year and almost finished the year with the best record in the AL, which is crazy. And that leads to perhaps my most incorrect take throughout the year, and that was just the entirety of my analysis on the Kansas City Royals. Um, Look, I have fallen for Royals optimism in the past. I believe they were my sleeper team in 2001, and they had the best record in the AL for the first month of that season and then crashed and burned. I was high on them at the beginning of 2023. They lost 106 games. And, in the offseason, they go out and get Seth Lugo, they get Michael Wacha, they get Hunter Renfroe to go along with, guys like Cole Reagans who had broken out the year before, Pasquantino in a full season. And everyone started hopping on the Royals train. And I was like, no, I've fallen for this trap too many times. I'm all in on the Tigers and the Twins in this division. I'm not hopping on the Royals this year. And guess what? I was wrong. The one time I don't hop on the Royals is the one time where they actually would have proven me right in all the other years. Yeah, I felt like regression was coming for this team for a very long time, and it kind of did towards the end there, but luckily Minnesota out-regressed them. They had 2 7-game losing streaks in September, but hey, I mean, they were a phenomenal team. They led the American League Central very late in the season at one point, tied with Cleveland. They were in the postseason picture from day one and never really snuck out of it. They picked it up in the second half, right where they left off. And you got to tip your cap to them because they proved me wrong this year. So, yeah, the entire AL Central was something that I was wrong on outside of the Tigers and the White Sox.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I took some L's there as well, starting with the Twins, which is my first incorrect take. It wasn't just that I predicted them in the preseason, which I'm pretty sure most did. It's just I'd never bought into the idea of the Guardians actually winning the division crown or the Royals, being ahead of the Twins. I've thought for sure, like up until, September, that the Twins were going to win that division, and they just never did. They never got that close. I mean, maybe they got a couple games in there, but they never had a lead for more than a day or two. In the preseason show, I called them a solid favorite to win the division. And yeah, I was pretty set on them winning the division until very, very late in the season. Just did not really have full belief in the Guardians or any other team in the AL Central, and the Twins ended up being fourth. So that shows you how that take went. But yeah, what is your second incorrect narrative?
Yeah, my second incorrect narrative. If there's one individual that I wouldn't shut up about from like November to March, it was Yandy Diaz. I was saying that he was a top 10 hitter in the game. I was citing his stats from the previous 2 years, his slash line, his exit velocity, his expected numbers, his strikeout rate, his walk rate. I would not shut up about Yandy Diaz being a top 10 hitter in the game. I was all for that take. And yeah, that did not even come close to coming to fruition again for a third straight year. And the red flags were there. I saw what the ground ball rate was. I saw what the BABIP was on ground balls. I felt maybe he could shrink a little bit below 52% of the ground ball rate. He went up to 55%. His fly ball rate dipped 3% as well. It was just not the season I was hoping for from Yandy Diaz. And to be honest, it never really got started. Like he started out slow and he progressively got like a little bit faster and ended the year with, I think, like 2 WAR maybe, something like that. What was the F4 on the year? I want to say it was around 2. It was 1.9. And yeah, that was, I'm not proud of that one. For as much as I was parading around Yandy Diaz, he didn't even make me look right for 1 second this season, except for his first at bat. His very first at bat of the season, he homered, and it was all downhill from there.
Yeah. Luckily, I think he picked it up a notch in like September when none of the Rays games really mattered. But yeah, my second incorrect take. It's about two different players. I did not have Juan Soto nor Shohei Ohtani in the top 10 of my Giant to 50. I think with this, especially with Soto, I was going a little bit too based off of the past two seasons and not necessarily what he was capable of doing. And it's obvious what he's capable of doing looking at this year, looking at 2021. But sometimes I go by the 2-year scale a little bit too religiously. And I think that kind of bit me with Soto particularly. But looking at those two, I thought Soto's hitting was not good enough to make up for his poor defense from 2022 and 2023. And I thought Ohtani was due to sort of balance out offensively. I know he was in the mid 180s OPS plus wise in 2023. That was a major career high for him. So I figured that was going to go down, but it didn't end up going down. Ohtani finished third in F4 and Soto finished fourth. So they were obviously, not only top 10 players, but top 5 players. Ohtani's OPS plus went up by 5 instead of regressing like I thought it would. And Soto's OPS plus went up by 23, making him, one of the most elite hitters in baseball this year. He was at a 178 OPS plus this year. Pretty unbelievable. Also, Ohtani stole 39 more bases and finished second in BSR. It was not factoring in his rise in base running abilities. Also, Juan Soto improved that fielding that I was so worried about. He improved his fielding run value by 6 runs this year, and it was basically a neutral defender in right field, which was a lot better than what he was doing. And it was an L because I did not share this with anyone else. MLB Network, ESPN, Baseball America, Foolish Bailey, and Daniel all had Shohei Ohtani and Juan Soto both in the top 10. And then CBS Sports had Soto in the top 10, but not Ohtani, but at least they got the Soto one right. So yeah, I really underestimated Ohtani and Soto, and I was pretty alone in that as most people had them above where I had them. But yeah, what is your third incorrect take?
Yeah, my third incorrect take. This is not really an off-season take. It was more of like a late 2023 take because I remember talking about this in the outdoor porch of my house. But I thought we had seen almost everything from Giancarlo Stanton before this season. And it turns out he still has something left in the tank. Giancarlo Stanton hit 191 with a 695 OPS and an 87 OPS plus in 2023. And I remember talking about, like, what if the Yankees release him? He's still got 4 years left on that deal. I think it's pretty clear that it's only going downhill from here, yada, yada. Brian Cashman even had the quote over the offseason where he said, like, we know he's going to get injured. That's just what he does. Well, he had his most plate appearances and most games played since 2021. And sure, he did have his time on the injured list, but, 459 plate appearances and a 115 OPS plus and 27 home runs. You absolutely take that if you're a Yankee fan going into the season. No doubt about that. So, yeah, I thought Giancarlo Stanton was going to be on release watch. I thought he was going to be just unplayable, both at the plate and, he is unplayable in the field. But I thought he was going to be just a major burden for the Yankees this year. And he really wasn't. He was a bat that you wanted to have up in any situation. He's not quite what he used to be, but he doesn't have to be because when he came to the Yankees, he was sold as, the tag team guy with Aaron Judge. And there's another guy that has that title now. So he doesn't have to worry about being that guy. And he did just fine for himself, given, the plate appearances that he had. If you had asked me before the season if Giancarlo Stanton had any shot at 500 home runs, he was at 402 before the season, I would have told you no. Now he's at 429. Going into his age 35 season, and I think pretty comfortably there's a window where he gets there, given what we saw from him this season. So I was wrong on Giancarlo Stanton. I thought we would be looking at the tail end of his career, and it feels like he's going to go into 2025 expected to be another bat every day in the Yankee lineup.
Right, yeah. My final incorrect take kind of ties in with one of yours, and it's just kind of the Royals in general. I was very pessimistic about them heading into the year. I said the Royals would not be much different than they were in 2023, and for context, they won 56 games in 2023. And I said they would be the worst fourth place team in the league, and that the only reason I didn't have them as a last place team was because the White Sox were in their division, essentially, maybe not word for word, but that's pretty much what I was saying. So instead of kind of staying at the same place, the Royals improved their win total by 30. They ended up finishing second in the AL Central as opposed to fourth, and they made the playoffs, which is not something I would have expected at all. And then along with that, I also said that Cole Reagans might be the only good starting pitcher that the Royals have, and they ended up with 4 qualified starters with a 1.14 ERA plus or higher, which I don't think any other team in the league had. They had, between Reagans, Walker, Lugo, and Brady Singer, they had a full staff of really productive pitchers, which again, I would not have predicted heading into the year. So yeah, the Royals proved me very wrong. And yeah, they ended up being a playoff team who we're going to be talking about later. But yeah, those are all the narratives from this year. Nothing topped my worst take last year, which was that the White Sox were going to win the division in 2023.
Yep.
I forgot to mention that one at the top. But yeah,
that's like the one that you hang in the rafters.
Yeah, that's a Hall of Fame horrible take.
Yeah.
But
especially because like I remember you talking about it just being like, the vibe just feels like it's there this year in Chicago.
I was like,
because like the entire basis of this show is we go off of what we see on paper and what we project through the numbers. Like vibes is not usually a thing that we use to evaluate anything on this show, but we did in that scenario. And it ended up being just a profoundly terrible take.
I was thinking like Tony La Russa was the only problem there. Oh, well, there's actually a lot of problems with the White Sox.
Yeah, I guess one manager can't fix 9,000 problems.
Yeah, no, exactly. But yeah, that does it for narratives, and now we will
stay tuned, by the way, for after the playoffs where we do our flops and hits for our players to watch this season. Always one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's a separate thing. That's another thing where we're kind of giving out takes, but it is a little bit risk.
That's its own thing.
Yeah, there's more risk and a reward with that. So
I'm not gonna lie, my harvest was very plentiful this year in terms of players to watch. Last year was a dreadful year for me.
Oh yeah,
I had a hit rate. My hit rate was like 15 to 20%. Had to be.
Right. Yeah. I'll never forget my 2021. I think I had 4 hits, 8 flops, and my best hit was Byron Buxton.
Byron Buxton who played 60 games. Yeah.
Yeah. 60. And by the way, it wasn't 2020. It was 2021.
But he was awesome in those 60 games.
He was great. He put up like 4 WAR.
Yeah.
But yeah, that does it for the narratives. And yeah, now we will scoot on over to our interview or guest appearance with Mark Simon, talking about playoff teams, their defense, all sorts of things, largely around defense, which is, as we kind of mentioned in the interview, like one of the more untapped stats, or the phase of the game where there's the most left up to interpretation, because hitting and pitching, we kind of know how to evaluate. Defense, we're still kind of figuring that out, but Mark Simon's really helping us out with that. So without further ado, here's Mark Simon. And we are here joined by the ARR defensive correspondent, Mark Simon, who you may know has been one of the contributors of the Fielding Bible, as well as one of the main promoters of defensive runs saved. Was recently on MLB Now, talking with Mike Petriello, also ARR alum, along with Brian Kenny, who I guess we're still kind of working on, but would love to have on at some point. But yeah, Mark Simon is here to join us. How have you been, Mark?
I'm good. Am I like the first member of the 3-timers club or whatever number this is for me?
Well, this is number 4. I think you're. Would he be tied? Or no? I think there's
Nico,
2 individuals.
But yeah. As far as people that work in baseball, you have the most appearances. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's yeah, we're here in the last week of the season. This will probably come out a little bit later, but yeah, I mean, how have you been enjoying the playoff hunt as things have kind of taken a tide turn as it seems?
Yeah, it has. If you remember, like back, I don't know, about 80 games ago, I think we were kind of concerned that in the National League you were going to have a couple of playoff teams that were barely over 500, and now your 4, 5, and 6 seeds are all pretty good teams at this point. And then you have in the American League, and the story may have resolved itself by the time people are listening to this, but you have this great story with Detroit. And essentially replacing the great story of Kansas City, which carried through for much of the season. And it was really cool to see them go from a worst to contender kind of team. So those are interesting. Aaron Judge obviously is an interesting story. And the Yankees having the best 1-2 punch since Gary and Ruth. Yeah, and I guess the resurgence of a team like the Mets in the latter part of the season, the resurgence of the Padres in the latter part of the season. Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Mets and just the roller coaster season we've had. That they've had something that we've said on this podcast. Chris and I are both Red Sox fans. In retrospect, the Netflix documentary should have gone to the Mets. Like that. Come on, like you could have ended it in July and still had a crazy story, a crazier story than we're gonna get with the Red Sox. You just have the same season that they have for the previous 2 years, except this time there's like a little bit more hope.
Right, exactly. The Mets season really has like this, oh my God, is the new amazing kind of feel to it, with what happened with Jose Iglesias, Mark Vientos turning into a star player, the starting rotation, which looked very iffy earlier in the season. Now they essentially have 5 guys that are basically that would probably be like number 2s or maybe good number 3s on teams. They don't necessarily have an ace. Sean Manaea is the closest to it. Francisco Alvarez coming on end of the year. Luis Angel Acuna, didn't see that coming. Lindor's had an MVP season, MVP caliber season certainly. Yeah, the Mets would have been. The Mets will be a good. The highlight film for the Mets, unless it ends completely disastrously in the next few days, the highlight film for the 2024 New York Mets is a pretty good highlight film. Maybe not 1986, a year to remember, but 2024 is a pretty good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely one of the more retrospectively positive years. That I think Daniel and I have been fans. It's been a lot of there's been a lot of disappointing years, but this is definitely not one of them. But yeah, you mentioned the Tigers having their resurgence. They're an interesting roster. Seem to be a one-headed monster at the top of the rotation, and then a trickle down after. And the lineup is pretty weird. However, their defense has really come and been strong throughout the year. How much do you think that defense has contributed to them, being contenders this year?
I think it's a really big deal. I think it is fair to say that this isn't meant as an insult, but I don't think that's a very good team. Like they're the guys that were supposed to be some of their standouts, Javi Baez, Spencer Torkelson, Casey Mize, were essentially all zeros for them this year. They traded at the deadline. They got rid of Flaherty. They got rid of Canna. They got rid of Chafin. They called up these guys, and you're wondering, like, where were these guys? Why weren't they up in, like, May? Because you're getting your Sean Gunthers coming up and pitching great, and your Trey Sweeney's at short being great, and that gets to the defense. They're not a particularly skilled infield at first, second, or third base defense-wise. They're good at short now with this guy Sweeney, who they got in the Flaherty trade. But they make up for it by putting their guys in the right spots. And the defensive metrics measure that. And they've done a really good job with that this season. And then when the balls hit to the outfield, one, it's a big park with a short fence, and they have athletes who can chase balls down. Riley Green is one, Parker Meadows is another. And then they have a very good pitch framer behind the plate, Jake Rogers. they're really greater than the sum of their parts, and the defense, I think, is a big part of that.
You mentioned Trey Sweeney, who's been one of my favorite players in the last like month or so. I think he's been such a huge part of this Tigers run. And like the stats might not show it on the surface, but like how important is it for a franchise, not just for this year on a playoff run, but also a team that's clearly looking to be competitive, for the foreseeable future, to have a shortstop that they signed to a big contract that hasn't worked out, and to be able to look at a guy like Trey Sweeney and say, this guy gives us the same defensive production and double the offensive production, even if it's still below league average. We know we can just plug this guy in and not even have to think about Javier Baez going into next year. Like, I think next year, Trey Sweeney has to have the opening day position at shortstop going into spring training with Javier Baez having to earn it back.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is just a gut guess, but Javi Baez is owed he's owed $73 million
Yeah.
over the next 3 years. And I have a feeling he's not going to be on that team next year. I have a feeling, just a gut call, that they will eat, I don't know, 60 of that maybe. 65 maybe, and they will find somewhere else for him to be, because it looks like they found their guy, and like all Trey Sweeney had to do was come up and essentially be a zero, and he's a significant improvement at shortstop over what they had. And this guy's come up and he's hit pretty decently, and he's fielded everything that he's been expected to field, and he makes a great catch that essentially wins a game in Baltimore. And like, he's not terrific. He's, his OPS is like 700 and 100 at bats, but he's so much better than what they have. It's funny how you could, like, when you have a negative and you go to like a 0 or a 1, that's like jumping from like a average player to a superstar, in terms of, like, in my opinion, in terms of like wins above replacement. And boy, it's a nice shot in the arm for them that I don't think anyone saw coming.
I mean, like, there's plenty of guys that on a national scale were virtually no names like a month ago that are such a big part of this Tigers run. Sweeney being one of them, but like Parker Meadows in the leadoff spot, Kerry Carpenter and what he does against righties. By the way, you mentioned that Sweeney catch in Baltimore. Chris and I were actually at that game.
Oh, sweet, very nice. Were you wowed by it? I hope you were.
Oh yeah, it silenced a very loud Orioles crowd that night.
It's a great play.
Indeed.
Really terrific play.
Yeah. And going back to your point on the infield positioning of the Tigers, based on the stats on the fielding Bible, they have 6 runs saved from non-shifts and 26 runs saved from shifts. And just counting, like I've been counting the past minute or so, it seems like they lead in, runs saved via shifts or non-shifts among all MLB teams. So yeah, it does seem that positioning has played a large factor in their defense. Tigers' run has been pretty fantastic. In terms of other teams or other individuals who may be some surprises, thus far in 2024, that players who have excelled or done the opposite, in teams who have excelled or done the opposite, of what you were expecting heading into this year.
Sure. Well, there are a few. I can go in a number of directions with this. If you start with the team that you guys root for, I think Wilyer Abreu and Jarren Duran have been very nice players defensively for Boston. I'm taking Duran's stuff from earlier this year, pushing that to the side to just articulate his statistical performance. Like, no comparison for him this year, past years. And both him and Cedar Rafaela, when they played center field, their arms were very valuable. They kept runners from advancing. They threw guys out. Rafaela eventually moved to the infield. So I think that's one. Like, the Red Sox outfield in general would be one, and I bring that up because you guys root for them. Other than that, I've been really impressed, and I'm just going to throw out some random names. Jacob Young of the Nats is really a go-get-'em outfielder, plays a very aggressive center field, plays very impressive center field, plays deep, but is able to chase down balls wherever they're hit. I didn't see that coming. I'm not as up on rookies as maybe a lot of other people are. Bo Naylor made significant pitch framing improvements this season and is now a very solid defensive catcher. I didn't see that coming. That's a solid one in his favor. The Brewers, I expected the Brewers to be good defensively, maybe not this good defensively. Turang is very good. Their outfield is fantastic, essentially at every spot, with a guy on the bench that can do it too. Blake Perkins, Sal Frelick. I don't think I expected Sal Frelick to be a right field defensive run save leader. That would be another. Where else do I want to go? Carlos Santana in Minnesota has been very good on a Twins team that has that lost its two best defensive players. I guess that's my list for now. There are others, but that's at least a few names for you.
Yeah, that's a strong list for sure. One guy that you mentioned that I've been very intrigued by is the first individual, I guess you mentioned, that wasn't more associated with his team, but Jacob Young
Yep.
from the Nationals. I think one thing that I said recently was I could see him being next year's version of Brenton Doyle, like a guy that
Yep.
plays phenomenal center field defense, but just doesn't really have good offensive stats. And you think, man, if he can just be a league average hitter, there's so much potential there. And we got to see it from Brenton Doyle this year. And Jacob Young could kind of go into spring training, I think, being that guy next year. And if that happens, like, we might be talking about a Nationals outfield that is maybe the most fun in the league. You have, Jacob Young in center. You have James Wood standing to his right, Dylan Cruz standing to his left.
Yep.
And a lot of potential comes from that very young outfield. Definitely a lot of potential there. And, Jacob Young in center is such a crucial piece, with the other two not exactly having the greatest defensive stats very early in their careers.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if James Wood wasn't a really good player. He's huge, and I have a feeling he's going to be one of those guys that eventually is going to scare you every time he comes up. Dylan Cruz rated well, by the way, in minor league defensive runs saved. I actually stumbled into that today. I know he's having some early rookie struggles, not uncommon. And I would expect that next year he will be an impressive player for Washington. But yeah, they have the makings of some decency. And now the Corbin contract is finished, over and done, and they can maybe take that money and perhaps invest it in something that will be particularly useful to them.
Yeah.
Concept.
One of the names you mentioned, Carlos Santana, I feel like at this point last year, we were having that same conversation with him, and we were like, yeah, it's Carlos Santana, though. Like, he's not going to do that again next year. And here he is. He's still a very quality defensive first baseman. Like, I don't watch enough of Carlos Santana and his rookie defense, but what do you think has helped him, rise among those ranks? Whereas, if you ask a casual baseball fan, I don't think they think Carlos Santana is the best, one of the best defensive first basemen in baseball.
I have to give him credit. I think he's improved his, I guess it's like, aggressiveness, because I feel like when I watch Quick Pitch now, that I see a lot of Carlos Santana diving for balls and making their top plays. And just in looking at the good fielding plays number that we have for him, it's like we're in an era where that number is actually coming down a little bit for some players because positioning is so good. But he's done a lot of good things over at first base, whether it's the catching of throws or the extending his range. And for a guy that's older, so name drop, I had a conversation on our company's baseball podcast with Mike Yastrzemski, and I said, he was talking about learning to throw in a different way from Jung-Hoo Lee, and I said, what propelled that? And he said, growth mindset. And I think that it's impressive that at 38, Carlos Santana, who's still a respectable offensive player, has worked to improve his defensive game to make him an even more valuable guy, as I think he says he's only got so many shots at a World Series left.
Yeah, I mean, especially, yeah, you mentioned a 38-year-old, but also like a guy that was a catcher for a very long time early in his career. Like, I can't imagine he's been playing first base consistently for a very long time. So to go from, a career, and maybe being a career catcher helps because I think naturally it's a more difficult defensive position. But I think, I mean, to go from behind the plate to facing it, like that's such a drastic change, and to become at 38, objectively the best defensively at your position in the league is just a stunning revelation that I can't imagine many people saw coming 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I guess the last thing regarding that point, yeah, Red Sox definitely have an interesting dichotomy, and I guess it's something you would call a good problem to have. Is like, obviously Trevor Story is going to be back full time next year, so Sedan Rafaela likely out of the shortstop position, and probably going to center, but like, yeah, it's an interesting situation where you don't know who's going to be playing center all the time. Obviously, Rafaela's versatility is an advantage that the Red Sox can play with, but might be a little bit of a logjam. But it's a good problem to have considering all the good defensive outfielders the Red Sox have between Duran, Abreu, and even O'Neill seems to be a good option at left field. If they keep him around.
I have a point here, and we can extend this point next year when we talk and beyond. I think you can never have enough good players, and that if you wind up in a situation where you have like too many good athletes or whatever the Red Sox problem is, keep them, because someone's going to get hurt. Something's going to happen that's going to make it a necessity that you're going to want to have that person. And I see that with teams all the time. You used to see it a lot with starting pitching. Don't trade your excess unless you are desperate. Hang on, because in this day and age, guys getting hurt, baseball being the way it is, keep your guys. You're going to need them.
There's been so much talk over the next couple weeks, and a lot of people kind of believe that there is going to be some very difficult trade that will be made this offseason for Red Sox fans to process, and it's probably going to involve perhaps one of the outfielders because, yeah, we mentioned you have Duran, you have Abreu, you have Rafaela. All three of those very young guys, all of them homegrown, or well, Abreu's not homegrown, but all of them have come up through the system. You have Roman Anthony coming up next year. You also still have Masataka Yoshida, who they just refuse to have play the outfield. He's been literally a platoon DH this year, even though he's been a pretty strong offensive hitter for the last like 3 months now. But yeah, there's been some kind of talk of trading somebody in that group for starting pitching. The big, I mean, I don't think there's been any, I mean, there definitely hasn't been discussions at this point, but they're like, oh, it's going to be a Red Sox outfielder for a Mariners starting pitcher. Like, that's going to be a trade that has to happen because the Mariners have all of the good pitching. They need offense desperately. The Red Sox need to have another pitcher, preferably a guy at the top of the rotation, and they have all this hitting. So that's the idea that many people have had. But yeah, I mean, especially in the Mariners point, like you talk about guys getting injured. I mean, trading a pitcher is such a risky move. And trading for a pitcher can be too, but like having a pitcher and trading him is such a difficult thing to process in many cases.
For sale.
Yeah, exactly. But see, that's the opposite. It's like, oh well, he's always hurt. We traded him, and it's like, oh, we ended up being healthy. What?
I wouldn't, if I'm Seattle, I wouldn't trade those guys. I would try and sign my way out of my offensive problems. I wouldn't trade Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Bryce Miller, Wu, Castillo. Fix it through. You can fix it through other means.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly lucky that they've gotten all 5 of them on, I mean, Wu's been up and down on the IL, but like other than that, like it this much health, and it almost feels like there's something due, and I don't want to be the person like, oh, there's going to be an injury, but like, no, that's incredible. Like them and the Royals, the fact that all of their pitchers stayed healthy the entire year and didn't have much issue, like that's something that you got to hold on to.
By the way, it's scary how just sorry to interrupt, but it's scary how bad the Mariners' offense is in their ballpark. Holy cow! I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, well, you can also look at the splits, the pitching splits there. I mean, I think that pitching staff is known as good as known as well as it is, partially because of that ballpark as well. If you look at some of the splits they have, even like strikeout rate for whatever reasons, like Mariners starters have way higher strikeout rates at T-Mobile. I don't know what because when you think of ballpark splits, you think of mostly what's going to be difference is like extra base hits and home runs, but definitely not strikeouts. But it seems to be a weird thing with that staff. But that's another conversation. As we're recording here, we are a few days away, which is pretty awesome to say. A few days away from the playoffs. We have 8 clinched so far as of the recording. I think 8 more in contention or something like that that have not been eliminated. But yeah, out of the teams that are kind of projected in the playoffs right now, who do you think is going to be most positively and or negatively impacted by their defense?
So if the Guardians or the Brewers win the World Series, we're going to be talking about a very large highlight reel of defensive plays, I think. Cleveland has Andres Jimenez, Brian Rocchio, Stephen Kwan. All 3 are Gold Glove caliber defenders, including 2 up the middle. I mentioned that Naylor's been very good behind the plate. Jose Ramirez is one of these guys that's like a finalist for Gold Glove every year, but it's never going to win it. He's solid at third. I think that they're a team that, as I said, if they're going to win, you're going to have a very long highlight tape. I think the same is true for the Brewers because the Brewers are going to allow the other team to hit the ball a pretty good amount. Their starting pitching is not an overpowering one by any means. And if they're going to win the World Series, it's going to be because their outfield made a ton of catches. Otherwise, among the teams that are in, Baltimore's defense was thought to be pretty good, but the numbers say otherwise this year. I think some of that might get fixed by some of the guys that they had coming back from injury, and Gunnar Henderson's pretty good. But like Mullins is all right. Santander is he's all right. He's okay. I wonder if they're going to need a big play to be made and the ball's going to hit a guy's glove. The other one that's interesting to me is the Phillies, who had a very good defensive season for the most part, but they have 2 defensive weaknesses. One is the guy in right field, who everybody likes.
What do you mean? He doesn't make errors.
He doesn't make errors, but he doesn't catch balls either. And yet, when the whistle sounds, or whatever analogy you want to use, when the bell rings in the postseason, guy shows up, makes plays. So he would be one. The other is Trey Turner has not had a particularly good year defensively. And if you watch the Phillies turn double plays, Bryson Stott and Trey Turner rank among the worst at turning double plays. It just isn't good, quite frankly. So I think if they're going to give teams extra outs by not turning double plays, maybe that comes back to haunt them. And then I guess the Padres don't do well by defensive runs saved. A lot of that is Luis Campusano was their catcher for most of the year. He's not anymore. Higashioka is pretty decent. And they have a couple of weak spots. Profar in left is one. Maryland center's all right. And then Tatis in right was all world last year, but for whatever reason this year, the balls that he was catching, he is not catching with the same success rate. So Padres Padres could strike out a lot of guys and make that irrelevant. But if a ball's hit to the outfield against them, if a ball's hit to the outfield, to the Brewers outfield and the Padres outfield, the Brewers outfield is going to make the catch a lot more often, in my opinion.
I think my favorite thing about the Brewers outfield, if you exclude Jackson Chourio, who obviously, garnered a lot of hype before he made his big league debut this season. Without Christian Yelich, every Brewers outfielder just kind of feels like the same guy. Like Sal Frelick,
Yeah.
Garrett Mitchell, Blake Perkins, like all
Yep.
of them have virtually. I mean, Garrett Mitchell's shown a little bit more power this year, I guess, but like all of them feel like kind of carbon copies of each other. So like, among that group, who do you really think stands out the most? I know you mentioned Frelick, so I'm assuming that's going to be your answer. But I mean, yeah, like what, like outside of excluding Churio, who is fantastic for more than defense, like what really
Yep.
stands out to you about the Brewers outfield in terms of individuals?
So, for consistency, I think Frelick is really good. For the home run robbery, Blake Perkins is fantastic. I forget the number he's got. He might have 4 at this point. I know that I'm almost positive the Brewers lead the majors, and he's one shy of the record, or he's at 5, but he can go up and get them, and he can steal them at important times. So I like them all. I think that Perkins, Frelick, and Mitchell, as you said, are fairly interchangeable defensively, and that's a nice luxury to have, considering that you got another guy that can hit in Churio. And yeah, so the Brewers, I do want to say one thing. The Brewers have one glaring defensive hole this year, and it's not at a spot you want it. It's shortstop, just like I was saying with Trey Turner. Willie Adames' defensive run save this year are really bad, and he's made a really large number of errors and misplays. He had this really bad 6 weeks. And it killed his defensive statistics. He's gonna score them runs with his offense, but I think in a big spot, you hope that he doesn't give him back with his D.
Interesting.
That is odd because he became known as one of the better defenders in the league at that position. But yeah, it seems to have faltered this year. And yeah, with teams like the Guardians and the Brewers, it definitely seems like they've been propped up by their defense. Because you think about those teams, there's no aces there. Obviously, with the Brewers, they traded Corbin Burns. They don't have Brandon Woodruff this year. With the Guardians, Shane Bieber looked great at the beginning of the year, but obviously got Tommy John, and their starting rotation doesn't look the same as it did, say, maybe a half decade ago, filled with great starting pitching. But I guess statistically to analyze that, they are propped up by their defense because they're both top 5 in team ERA, but outside the top 10 in fielding independent pitching.
Yep.
Brewers, meanwhile, are outside the top 20, so they're really propped up by their defense. So yeah, it seems like if you have the defense there, you don't necessarily need the fully dominant pitching.
I think they're both gonna lose in the first round, by the way.
Yeah,
That's an entirely fair take to have, but
yeah,
you never
can
know.
see that. But
I think if Cleveland runs into a Detroit team with momentum, I think that's a problem for them. Although they're going to be they're going to get the first round bye. I think they're going to run into trouble in the division series, and I think the Brewers are going to run into trouble whether it's the Mets, the Diamondbacks, or Braves. I think Milwaukee's not beating any of those 3 teams.
Yeah. It's hard to see, especially considering what they've looked like in the past few postseasons. But yeah, so that's kind of the postseason outlook. Heading into the off season, which will start a little bit over a month from now. Who are some players who maybe increase their free agent value through their the most through their defense heading into the 2024 to 25 off season?
The answer to this a few weeks ago was very, very clear, and now it is a little bit less so. The answer a few weeks ago was Matt Chapman, who looked like his old self at third base for the Giants this year, fully recovered from the hip surgery that I think took him down a little bit to where he wasn't making the amazing play with the same frequency. This year he's been great, and then the Giants took him off the market. They overpaid, I think, by a little bit, and said, we want to keep you because we can't seem to get anybody else. And Matt, I think, took the money. And I think he was the answer to that. He was the answer to that weeks ago. less so now. I don't know that there's anyone that really helps themselves a lot. Alex Bregman is a very good third baseman, so I think a team can feel confident that for a couple more years he's going to be a pretty good third baseman when he because you figure he's going to get a pretty good look in free agency. Juan Soto has helped himself in right field and in the outfield for the Yankees this year. I think any red flags that someone might have had about his defense. I don't know that you want to put him in a large park, but I think Juan Soto in Yankee Stadium for the next 10 years or 8 years, whatever it's going to be, I think he will be fine there. Pete Alonso, Anthony Santander, they're, I guess, on their. I think Alonso on his best day is a decent first baseman. Santander on his best day is a decent outfielder. I don't think anyone's going to be particularly fearful of their defenses, even though their defensive numbers may not be that great going into free agency. I don't think it's going to cost them any money. I think Pete will get a big deal, and Santander has hit his way into a really nice one for sure.
Is Carlos Santana? Yeah, Carlos Santana's another one. also
Sure.
an incoming free agent.
He's 30. Yeah, he's 39. He's
Yeah.
39, and
Yeah, well,
I don't know whether he's getting more than a year, but I would think he would certainly get a year from
shot.
somewhere. Like
No
right,
shot, but
he's still a respectable player. Cody Bellinger also, like, another one who didn't hurt his status in free agency in any way with regards to his defensive numbers, even though the hitting took, as was predicted before the year started by a lot of people, his hitting took a little bit of a hit.
that's a testament to Chris. Chris was all over that last year.
However,
People love that story. It was a huge thing last year, free agency.
Yeah. However, I thought he was gonna. He hit like over 400 on ground balls last year or something like that, and I was like, okay, that's gonna go way down. His total offensive production went down by a lot, but he's still getting great luck on ground balls for whatever reason. So I'm right and I'm wrong.
Everything else fell down to earth.
Yeah, but it is a big win for the Nerds that he did not hit 307 with an 881 OPS again after below average exit velocity.
You know where it's a win. It's a win for like the Dan Zimborskis of the world, who always say that things tend to come back to the middle. Because if you take his 23 and his 22 and you basically mush them together, you get his 24.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it definitely seems so. Yeah, that's mostly what we have prepared for current event stuff.
Real quick, you also, sorry to cut you off, Chris. You mentioned Matt Chapman, who, yeah, like the defensive resurgence has been awesome. But not a lot of people are talking about the fact that he has the chance to break the Barry Bonds curse. It would take a lot right now, but he is sitting at 27 home runs. And if you recall the stat, he needs 3 because nobody on the Giants has had a 30 home run season since, I'm looking at the Baseball Reference page right now, that would be 2004 Barry Bonds.
That's crazy. That's
and when
really
I say
amazing.
I'm looking at the Baseball Reference page, I mean I literally have it on a poster on my wall right here. Hang on, real quick.
Of course.
Yeah.
The viral
a win for the Nerds.
Yeah.
Big win for the Nerds. I'm just double checking what Cody Bellinger's average on ground balls is this year. Yeah, he hit 309 on ground balls last year. League average is, around 245 or whatever. Yeah. He's hitting 365 on ground balls this year, and he's still greatly underperforming offensively. Pretty wild. But yeah, that's mostly it for current events. But Daniel did have particular interest in one, future Hall of Fame sluggers season from 17 years ago. Daniel, do you want to get more into this?
Yeah, I don't even really remember the backstory for how I found this or when it even was. It probably happened like after or before the last time we even recorded. But I was just perusing Baseball Reference one day, as I do, and I was looking at Albert Pujols, very common activity for, I'm sure, a lot of people. But I noticed, I just couldn't help but notice his 2007 season. This was after he had transitioned from the outfield to first base. Albert Pujols is generally especially with the Angels, was a career negative at first base defensively, as are most first basemen, especially ones that are on the wrong side of 30. But Albert Pujols was at best average through most of his career at first. But in 2007, the guy just casually put up 2.3 defensive wins above replacement, the highest for a first baseman with at least 70% of their games played at first. I have another stat that I want to find real quick, but like the greatness of it went back to like the 1800s or something like that.
You want to know what the deal is?
Yeah, I do want to know what the deal is. I want to know how it happened. I want to say the stat. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I want to say that it was something like, it was like the most, it's the most defensive WAR by a first baseman, with at least 75% of their games played at first. But the second best was like Roger Connor.
Shout out
All right, so
Connecticut.
here,
It was every first baseman with 1.5 D WAR. It was 1890 Mike Lehane, 1890 Cap Anson, 1890 Roger Connor. All of them did it the same season. I don't know what was up with D WAR in 1890, but Albert Pujols in 2007 just completely blew them all out of the water. Had like half a win more on defense. So like, what's the deal here? What happened with that
Sure.
season?
So let's explain defensive run save for a second. And the way that it worked, and this is particularly true, I think it's pre-2013. So there's like there's a 20-something year history to defensive run saved. First 10 years or so, it worked one way. More recently, it works another. In that time period when defensive run save was created, we didn't have like the all 9 cam that we have access to now. We didn't have access to defensive positioning like we do. So what we did when they created defensive run save was they said that positioning counts, and positioning counts for the player. And what that means essentially is that, like, so if you have a first baseman who plays way over in the 3-4 hole, and makes plays repeatedly on ground balls that other first basemen are zeroing on, essentially not getting anything on, he's racking up runs saved that no other player can touch. And he was I asked 2 people. I asked David Eckstein and I asked Skip Schumacher. This is something I wrote like 5 years ago. And they said that he played a ridiculous first base that year. He played way off the bag. And nowadays, what would happen is the credit that Pujols was getting back then, the team would get credit for putting him in a spot like he was in to make it out. So just imagine, let's say there was a ball with a 30% out probability based on where, based in general. But because Pujols was where he was, the out probability on that ball suddenly becomes a lot higher. The team is getting credit for improving the chance of getting an out on that play. In the past, Pujols was getting the credit for that. So that 31 probably would be something in the high teens, I would guess, or maybe low 20s. It would still be great. It wouldn't be 31. 31 is like, I think a guy hitting 60 home runs and the next in a offensive depleted year, where, like, I don't know, like a Babe Ruth, it's a Babe Ruthian kind of season, but it has an explanation, and it's not to take anything away from Pujols. He knew that he could play way off the bag, and that Eckstein would loop his throws really slowly, and he'd be able to get back and catch them. That's the story. I feel like that should be like a YouTube video, if it isn't already, from someone like Foolish Baseball, of like, here's the story of Albert Pujols' Ruthian defensive season.
Yeah, I mean you broke it down perfectly. It's interesting. So when did that change happen? You said 2013, where they gave teams credit for defensive
because
positioning.
of shifts, because of the growth of shifts, and suddenly it became clear that teams were putting guys in spots, and players didn't have as much control over their positioning as they used to.
And defensive runs saved is what started in what, like 03, I want to say. What year is that? 03?
It's 03. It actually, we tracked games for a few years and didn't release it publicly, so people didn't have like access to it. I think until like 06.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's usually how it goes
Yeah.
with some of these numbers. Like outs above average, I think came into play in like 2019, but it existed starting in
Yep.
2016.
Yep. So, but yeah, that's the story on Albert Pujols, the Hall of Famer.
No, I love it. That's so cool. And I'm glad my next question was going to be, what do you think that season would look like nowadays with uh the modern evaluation? But yeah, you said high teens, low 20s. So yeah, you already answered that. But even that would still be phenomenal for first base. Like that's
Yeah,
he
for
gets a
sure.
little extra boost because of the way that it was set at the time, but like that's still a really, really good season at the position. Where would that rank?
He,
Uh
I think that would be up. That would still be up near the top because he had some other ones that are in the teens. Matt Olson was at 15 as of the other day. I think he might have come down a little bit.
mhm.
Christian Walker's had a couple of good years, but yeah, like we're not typically talking about first basemen as huge defensive run save guys because like honestly, we don't put the emphasis on catching throws. The emphasis for defensive run saved is largely on fielding balls, and first basemen just aren't making that many plays. But that year, Pujols made a ton of plays and
One
made
thing
them
that
in.
I've always One thing that I've always wanted to see evaluated, and I don't know if it is on defensive run saved, I don't think it's evaluated on outs above average, is the first baseman's ability to pick a ball out of the dirt. Like, is that something that uh is taken into consideration?
Yeah, so that actually, I like educating on defensive run save. That exists in the grand scheme of things. We kind of changed our approach on that, though. We only give the credit. It's got to be and there are definitions for all these things, but in your eyes and my eyes, it has to be a really good scoop
Hmm.
for a guy to get credit for it. It used to be that we would credit, I think, almost everyone, but now it's a little harder, but the amount of runs saved that you can get and you can lose from that is generally only a couple. Because I think what we found is that there isn't necessarily that much of a difference between the best guy and an average guy. There might be a big difference between the best guy and the worst guy, but it's not like the same as others. And I have a feeling Statcast will have its own spin on this probably in the next few years. And good for them. We like to see more research done in defense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Always good to get a little bit more perspective on defensive evaluation because yeah, as we've mentioned, there's the most up to interpretation with that compared to pitching and hitting. We kind of know what to look at with pitching and hitting for the most part. But defense usually, yeah, it's like the redheaded stepchild of statistics.
It is.
But yeah, anything either of you wanted to had top of mind before we wrap it up?
I mean, all I gotta say is like, Mark, we got a very special 100-year anniversary coming up next year, and I feel
Oh, we
like
do.
I feel like we need to take advantage and perhaps make that the entire theme of our next conversation.
So we're talking about the 1925 World Series.
Well, of
I
course,
need
I'm
to
talking about the 1925 World Series.
I need to read. There's a so we always bring this up that it's like all four appearances. I'm sure it's come up in some way. There is a book about the 25 Pirates, and there is a book I think about the 24 World Series. And again, if Twitter had existed back then, it would have broken Twitter. The craziness of the last game in both situations. We can certainly pay tribute to it again next year. It would have been um, the biggest of the big in terms of just absurdity in sports for sure.
Yeah, I think something needs to be done next year to honor. I mean, we need to. I feel like we need to release a pod on the actual anniversary. Like, what day was Game 7 played?
Probably very early October.
Probably like September 3rd.
Yeah, exactly.
Hang on, I've got it. I have it on my screen right now because
Oh,
you guys
perfect.
started to bring it up.
You beat me to
October
it.
15th. October 15th
15th.
is Game 7 of the 1925 World Series.
All right, so October 15th, 2025. You heard it here first. There will be a new episode of Above Replacement Radio featuring Mark Simon, and it'll be the 100th anniversary special
Well,
of the greatest game ever played.
You talk about it breaking Twitter. It's sort of gone like in its own way, re-viral. The picture
It
of the
has.
gasoline, and the fire on the infield. Like, I mean, that's grounds crew innovation in 1925, I guess.
Given
Um,
given how much a big talking point in the world right now is misinformation spread over the internet, I'd have to imagine there are so many people that see that photo and are like, no, that's AI, that didn't happen. Like, no, that happened.
it's real.
It's real, and it was amazing. Um, yeah, so yes, at some point we will have to chat about. I'm staring at it right now. Game 7 of the 1925 World Series was the best anyone had seen, if only they could. That was the headline
Real.
recently in the Washington Post. The greatest game you couldn't see because it was hurricaning or monsooning in the middle of the day.
Yeah, justice for Walter Johnson. He deserved that one. I had a moment like a few months ago that I feel like you would have really loved if I actually went through with it. But I was on my way to work and I went to Dunkin' on the way in, went through the drive-through, and the guy working the drive-through when I got there was wearing a baby blues Cardinals jersey. And I was like, "That's a sweet jersey, man. I love that." He goes, "Thank you, thank you." Like, my friend's pissed at me for wearing this. And I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "Because I like the Yankees." And it took every part of me to not be like, "Oh, your friend's still mad about the 1926 World Series." Me.
Really, it's amazing the run that the 1920s had for World Series. Yeah, I'm looking. You got me looking at this now. This column is a Tom Boswell column, 2020. The lead of it is: if Game 7 of the 1925 World Series happened today, the internet would overload and implode. Sports talk radio would not shut up for a year. Bars would need cops to settle debates, and we would have enough gifs and memes to finish the century.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there you go.
It's just a shame. Yeah, it's a shame it didn't happen in a social media era. But yeah, it's a wonderful part of baseball history, infamous part of baseball history for the folks in Washington still or Minnesota. I don't know. If there's,
Minnesota cared a lot in 1925 about a
yeah,
team that
yeah,
they were
yeah,
going to have in
exactly.
30 years.
They were totally heartbroken about their future team being screwed over. But yeah, until we have you back on for that lovely discussion. It's been a pleasure. Make sure if you're listening, follow Mark Simon on Twitter if you're not already at Mark A Simon Says, and follow Sports Info Solutions on Twitter at sportsinfo_SIS. Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, for giving us more insight on the world of defense.
You got it.
And that does it for the Mark Simon segment of the episode. Always a pleasure to have him on. Always very enthusiastic to do the show, even though I'm sure he has lots of other cool things to do. Or the guy was on MLB Now. I mean, that's the pinnacle for our world.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, it's a great place to be. But yeah, so now we will move on to our previews and eventual predictions of each of these next 4 series, which I'm pumped to watch. So yeah, we'll start off with Houston, and yeah, we'll start off in chronological order of how these games will be played. Houston and Detroit.
Yeah. So this is the number 3 seeded Houston Astros and the number 6 seeded Detroit Tigers. These teams played each other 6 times throughout the regular season, with Houston winning 4 out of those 6 and outscoring the Tigers 29-27. So it was very close, but it is very important to note that I think these were 2 very different teams in the 2 times that they've played each other. They played each other in mid-May. They played each other in mid-June. Detroit has the best record in the majors since August 11th. They are 31-13 in that span. They've allowed the fewest runs out of every team. Houston is 55-53 since June 19th. That is the best record in the American League and the best run differential in the American League. These 2 teams, this is kind of the hot hands in the American League. They have the 2 best records in the American League since July 1st, July 19th, and August 1st. So over the last 2 to 3 months, these have been the best 2 teams in the American League. and they're facing each other in the wild card round because that's kind of the weirdness of this season and how streaky a lot of teams have been. As far as starting pitchers, we only know game one, which is going to be perhaps the most anticipated pitching matchup, I would say, of any wild card series game here. We got Tarek Skubal versus Framber Valdez. Skubal has been the best pitcher in the league all year. Valdez by F4 has been the best pitcher since June. So, the full season versus the more recent hot hand, this is the game to watch. Skubal faced 2 times this season. On May 11th, he went 6 1/3 innings pitched, 7 hit, 2 runs, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts, and 0 home runs in Comerica Park. And on June 14th, in Minute Maid, he pitched again 6 1/3 innings, gave up 6 hits, 4 runs, 1 walk, 2 strikeouts, and 1 home run. So Houston's gotten to him before. But again, this is a very different team on both sides. And Framber Valdez has faced Detroit once this year. It was on May 10th at Comerica. He pitched 7 innings, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts, 0 home runs, and a 78.3% ground ball rate, which is, of course, very important to mention when you're talking about Fez. The Astros will be playing this series at home, where they are 46-35 this season. They are also 27-16 at home since June 19th. The Tigers will be on the road, of course, where they are 43-38 this season, just over 500. But since August 11th, they are 14-6. So they've won 14 of their last 20 on the road. Definitely a very good number going into this series. The Astros rotation since June 19th, they have a 3.25 ERA, which is second lowest, in Major League Baseball. They have a 3.60 FIP, which is the second lowest, and 9.3 FWAR, which is the third best. The Tigers bullpen since August 11th, 242 innings pitched, which the next closest is 195. So they've been getting the most bulk innings out of their bullpen by far in the majors. They have a 227 BABIP against, which is the best, a 228 ERA, which is the best, a 330 FIP, which ranks fifth, a 3.3 FWAR, that ranks second. Going back to the starting pitchers, since June 19th, Valdez has made 16 starts. He's thrown 102 2/3 innings pitched. He's averaged 6.4 innings pitched per game start. He has thrown to a 2.19 ERA, which is the third best out of 71 qualifiers, and has a 2.79 FIP, which ranks fifth. As for Skubal, he has made 17 starts, 106 innings pitched, so around the same rate in terms of innings pitched per start as Valdez. He's a 2.55 ERA and a 2.52 FIP. So that's kind of the breakdown here for this Astros Tigers series. Chris, what are some things that you're going to be looking for in this set of games here?
Yeah, and we're looking at the prep sheet. I put that extra note about Valdez and Skubal since June 19th because like when saying those numbers, they're really not very different.
No.
Obviously Skubal has been better this year. He's going to deservedly win Cy Young, and luckily for me, I was high on him all year. I picked him as he was my preseason Cy Young pick. But look, he's been, and what's been great about him is he's been his like it's been flat. Like he's been the same guy pretty much the entire year. He hasn't been streaky whatsoever. Like pretty much every start has been productive in some way or another, which has been great. But Valdez has been, pretty much on the same level of excellence since June 19th, which is pretty much when the Astros got hot. So I think that's very interesting to look at because, looking at that matchup, it's like, obviously, yes, Skubal has the better numbers overall this year. He's been the better pitcher throughout the year, but when you split that season in half and choose the later half, the most recent half, it's a very even matchup. And in terms of lineups, I don't think it's very even. So I think, and obviously he's going to be played in Houston. So I think it, being able to throw out a guy against the Cy Young winner who is around as good, that's a really great advantage for the Astros for sure. And then one thing I was also going to add, Skubal had 2 strikeouts in that one start against Houston. Every other start among his 31 starts, he had at least 5. So that's how good the Astros are at making contact. They can even force Tarek Skubal to get only 2 strikeouts. They were the only team to do that. So but yeah, that's kind of what stuck out is like Valdez really is right in the hot hand. The whole Astros pitching staff is right in the hot hand, which helps out. But I mean, obviously, it's really hard to ignore how hot the Tigers have been. And it's, if anyone's gonna pull out some magic, not necessarily have the better roster, not be more talented, not have more playoff experience, but just pull out some random magic beans and take over Houston and win in some weird way, it might just be the Tigers.
Not only that, but I mean, you mentioned a lack of playoff experience on this team. The most playoff experience, and perhaps the most important playoff experience you could ask for, is coming from the manager position here, right? I mean, not only does AJ Hinch have probably the most playoff experience of any current MLB manager, but he has playoff experience specifically in Houston. Has he ever done it as a visitor? No, but I think understanding specifically that atmosphere and what it's going to be like, that's going to be meaningful. And yeah, that's obviously the major storyline, right? It's AJ Hinch coming back to manage against his old team in the playoffs, and all of the fallout that happened there with him, and all of that fun stuff. But he's back, and that's very fun. In terms of matchups, we obviously talked at length about Scuba versus Valdez and how it's a much more even matchup than people realize. No other starters have been announced. The game 2 starters are not known at this point. But I would have to assume it's probably some combination of Hunter Brown or Yusei Kikuchi for the Astros. No idea what the Tigers are doing. No idea what the Tigers are doing. AJ Hinch, I believe, had a quote today where he said, "We're going Scuba game 1 and chaos the rest of the way."
Yeah.
Which is pretty much just what the last 3 weeks have been.
Right.
I mean, they've been running basically on a one-man rotation.
Yeah, it's gonna be funny when if and when they like make it to a best of 7 series and people are like, well, I don't know if they can sustain it through a long series. Well, no, they did it for a whole month.
Yeah, they did it for 3. But that's all they need to do. 7 games
Yeah.
is nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Could they do this over 162? I don't know, but they don't have to.
Yeah. And obviously, yeah. So we're gonna make predictions after all the previews, not just after we talk about these series. But anything more you wanted to talk about before we move on to Orioles Royals?
No, I think that's kind of all I had on that one.
Yeah, for sure. It's really just it really is like the kind of David Goliath, like
Yes. I think it's very funny that this is the series of the 2 hot hands, and the other AL wildcard series is the 2 struggling teams.
Right. Yeah. And this might be the bet like the most optimistically we've looked at a 3 seed, at least in this playoff format. I don't think
Absolutely.
yeah, a lot of the time we just kind of look over the team, if not even view them as a threat to the World Series for the most part. Like thinking, yeah, Guardians, Cardinals 2022, and then last year it was Twins and Brewers. So
Yep.
yeah, Astros are definitely the best 3 seed we've had in this format. On to Orioles Royals. The Orioles taking the 4 seed. They're going to be hosting at Camden Yards against the Kansas City Royals. In terms of the season series, the Baltimore Orioles won that. They won 4 games to 2 and outscored the Royals 29-27. Both those series were in April, so they weren't really the exact versions of themselves, but I think they were both doing well at the time. So there is that. In terms of what they're doing at the respective locations, Baltimore is 44-37 at home this year. Kansas City is 41-40 on the road. In terms of trends, both teams, as you mentioned, are kind of struggling. The Baltimore Orioles on the longer term scale are 34-38 in their last 72 games. However, they have won 5 of their last 6 against above 500 teams, notably them being the Yankees, who didn't have a division title yet, and then the Twins, who were still for
one of those games.
For one of those games, was fighting for a playoff spot, but not the rest of those games. And then with Kansas City, they were doing really well for most of the year, but they've kind of slid off the last month or so. They are 11-18 in their last 29 games. And what specifically crashed the Royals is their offense. in those 29 games that I just mentioned where they went 11 or where they've gone 11 and 18, they are slashing 200, 268, 300 for a 572 OPS as a team. That is pretty wild to have a 572 team OPS. They have the lowest average on base percentage, slugging, OPS, expected batting average, and sweet spot rate in baseball in the span, and the second lowest expected slugging behind the White Sox. So obviously offense is a problem. Looking individually at who is particularly struggling, Salvador Perez has a 569 OPS in this span. Hunter Renfroe's at 545. MJ Melendez is at 500. Michael Garcia is at 480. Freddie Fermin is at 368. And Paul DeYoung is at 356. So yeah, that Royals offense is going to be a topic of discussion for a lot of broadcasts because of how poorly they've done since late August. And yeah, looking at the matchups, we know what the game one matchup is going to be. We actually know all three Royals starters, but only one of the Orioles starters. But it's going to be Corbin Burns versus Cole Ragans for game one. You could, depending on how you look at it, Corbin Burns is hot or Corbin Burns is cold. Corbin Burns in his last three starts has thrown 19 innings to the tune of a .47 ERA, 2.11 FIP, and 36% strikeout rate. Those opponents he faced were Detroit twice and the New York Yankees. However, in his last 10 starts, which actually includes those three starts, he's thrown 55 and 2/3 innings with a 4.04 ERA and 3.70 FIP, which kind of reflects him more as a mediocre pitcher or maybe even just slightly above average pitcher in his last 10 starts. When Corbin Burns faced Kansas City, he had pretty standard numbers: 11 1/3 innings pitched, 2 starts, by the way, 5 earned runs for a 3.97 ERA, 7 strikeouts, 1 walk, 1 homer for a 3.34 FIP. Cole Ragans, when he faced Baltimore, had 2 starts. 1 went really bad, 1 went really good. One of them he gave up 7 earned runs, but overall he had 8 innings pitched, 7 earned runs allowed for a 7.88 ERA, but 11 strikeouts, 2 walks, no homers for a 1.17 FIP. So Baseball Reference would say he did horribly. Fangraphs would say he did excellent. What I might note that FIP does not note is that he had a 39% line drive rate against the Orioles this year. And then we got Seth Lugo going game 2. Seth Lugo actually has done better on the road this year. He had a 2.62 ERA and 3.03 FIP on the road this year. And he had the 7th best road ERA among 94 qualifiers and the 3rd best road FIP. So, Seth Lugo going on the road is not a problem for him, or at least it hasn't been this year. But yeah, what are kind of you looking at when you're looking at this Orioles-Royals series?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that Corbin Burns strikeout stuff. I think having the strikeout stuff is going to be so huge for him in this start. The Royals, he's kind of running into a team that's trended the wrong way on offense, and that's definitely beneficial for him. But I mean, we know what Corbin Burns looks like when he's at his best, and we know what he looks like when he's not at his best. It's whether or not he's striking guys out. That's what we saw in his Cy Young season of 2021. That's what we saw in the first half compared to the second half, where he kind of, he was the all-star starter, and then he kind of dipped down a little bit. We know that Corbin Burns needs to be striking guys out. That's how he maximizes his success. And if he's not getting the swing and miss, then it's hard to picture him having any meaningful success in a lot of instances. So yeah, I mean, you mentioned the 36% strikeout rate over those last 3 against 3 competitive teams. So that's encouraging. As far as the Royals go, I am very excited to see this rotation, on the main stage. I think, with what we've seen this year, Ragans, Lugo, and Waka is not something you want to mess with in a short series. I think the bullpen is interesting. I mean, the Royals, of course, have the most important piece of anyone in this postseason, and that's reliever Will Smith.
Yes,
who is going on his 4th World Series in a row.
Yep, and he might catch that title for sure.
Yeah,
very possible. Notably, you mentioning the strikeouts. Actually, that's been a larger problem for the Royals recently, but before that 29 game span, the Royals had an 18% strikeout rate as a team, which ranked second lowest, so they were the second best at making contact. In this span, where they've really struggled, they have a 25% strikeout rate, which is as a team, that is an extremely large jump to have in a 29 game span. So yeah, I mean, if Corbin Burns has the strikeout stuff, he might actually be able to strike out some Royals, which the Royals haven't struck out much this year, but over the last month, it's been more of a problem for them. So yeah, it's I think a lot of questions could be answered tomorrow. Hopefully the weather permits. I know it's supposed to rain in Virginia, but hopefully it doesn't hit Baltimore. But yeah, anything more before we move on to the next series?
I mean, this is obviously a series of some exciting youth. I mean, for the entire first half of the season, the discussion was would you rather have between Bobby Witt Jr. and Gunnar Henderson. So it's cool that we're seeing them match up in a playoff series. Little bonus fun fact, I guess there. Also, very cool that we're getting 14 ALCS rematch.
Yeah.
I love the obscure playoff rematches. Like Astros Tigers have never faced each other. I actually thought about this. I think this is the first time the Astros and Tigers have been in the postseason in the same year.
Right. Yeah.
Because the Astros first made it in, forget whether they were in the AL or not, but the Astros first made the playoffs in 2015. The Royals or the Tigers drought started after 2014.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting overlap for sure. And with Orioles Royals, it's one of those series where
I don't think the Tigers made it. The Tigers definitely didn't make it in 05 because different AL Central team was on top that year.
Yeah. Each fan base could use a playoff series win, no matter what. So, each team or each organization hasn't had a playoff series win since 2015. Yeah, when the Royals won the World Series. Because yeah, Orioles haven't had a playoff series win since 2014. So yeah, trying to get revenge of 2014.
Yeah, I don't love that the Orioles are going into another postseason facing a team with zero postseason experience and nobody thought had any business being in the playoffs before the year.
Yeah, that is troubling.
Yeah.
Yeah, see how that goes. But yeah, anything more before we get into Brewers Mets?
No.
Yeah, so with the Brewers and Mets, Brewers are hosting the 6-seeded Mets as the 3 seed, and Milwaukee pretty much dominated the season series. Not that it really matters that much, but they won 5-1. They outscored the Mets 28-17. Granted, half those games were played literally opening week
in March.
Yeah, in March. So
that season was so funny. Like the Mets season was just a giant sandwich with the Brewers being the bread and vice versa.
Yeah,
they started and ended playing each other.
Exactly. In terms of what the Brewers have done at American Family Field, they were 47-34 at home this year. Meanwhile, the Mets were 43-38 on the road, so no huge discrepancy there. Mets have obviously been trending really well over the past about 4 months, starting with Grimace in June.
Yes.
They are 65-38 in their last 103 games for the best record in baseball. And then if you even look on a shorter term scale, like the last month, they are 20-9 in their last 29 games, which is also the best record in baseball. So in order for that to happen, they need to have a lot of players trending in the right direction. The Mets offense as a whole were third in OPS in their previous 101 games heading into today, while their pitching was fourth in ERA and first in FIP in their previous 27 games heading into today. Looking at some of those pitchers, Jose Quintana has been doing really well over his last 5 starts. In those 5 starts, he has a .90 ERA and 2.13 FIP in 30.0 innings. It feels very similar to what he was doing with the Cardinals in 2022, how he ended his year there. Only I remember that because, yeah, I had him as a how about that. But David Peterson has also been doing really well. Over his last 11 starts, he has a 2.41 ERA and 2.77 FIP in 67 1/3 innings pitched. And then Francisco Lindor has obviously been leading the charge offensively since May 21. May 21 of this year, he has a 938 OPS and the third most F4 in baseball. So according to Fangraphs, he's been the most valuable or the third most valuable player in baseball since about mid-May. And then looking at the Brewers bullpen, or looking at the Brewers as a whole, they've kind of been on the same trend the entire year. They haven't really been streaky. They've been consistently at the top of the division, and it hasn't really been in much doubt for the entire year, or at least since maybe June when the Cubs started struggling and the Brewers became sort of the favorite. So there's not really many trends with the Brewers, which can be good and bad. Like they're obviously not streaky. They're not really relying on just being hot. They've just been good all year. But what are you looking at with this series?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much stuff like this really carries over from March into the postseason, but I mean, there was a benches clearing brawl between these two teams earlier this year with the Rhys Hoskins slide and the bat flip on the homer and whatnot. My hot take for this series is I feel like Rhys Hoskins is either going to have an OPS like over 1,300 or below 500 with no in between, and whichever one it is will determine who wins.
Yeah, very.
But this Mets rotation is super interesting. It gives me like preseason 2015 Red Sox vibes where we were thinking like we had like 5, 2 or 3 starters. But I mean, they've all been pitching like aces lately, and that's awesome. It's going to be cool to see Luis Severino back on a playoff mound. Obviously, he was awesome with the Yankees in some of those years. Did have some blow up starts, but also did have some good ones. So it'll be, but then again, that was 6, 7 years ago. Quintana back in the postseason is fun. I remember him with the Cardinals in 22 and that run he had in September into the postseason, and he pitched well in that game. But unfortunately, the bullpen blew it for him, if I remember correctly.
Bullpen and defense too.
Bullpen, yes, yep. Yeah, and then Peterson, he's been very interesting. He's been keeping the ball in the yard quite a lot. He has .27 home runs per 9 in his last 11 starts. I mean, the thing that we've talked about for so many years, Sarah Langs brings us up every single year, is teams that out homer their opponents on the postseason are usually the teams that win. It's like an 80% win percentage or something like that. So that's definitely key. Keeping the ball in the yard. It's obviously a very hitter friendly environment. And the Brewers rotation is also just very interesting. Like, I don't really know what they got going on behind Freddie Peralta. Like, Tobias Myers,
Yeah,
is he getting one of those starts? They giving one to Aaron
I'd
Savali,
be
Frankie Montas, Colin Ray. Like, what are they going with here?
I would be utterly shocked if any Brewers starter goes into the 6th inning this series,
Wow. Okay, including Peralta.
including Peralta. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Oh.
maybe obviously I haven't seen the Brewers play in the postseason under Pat Murphy, but it just like given how good the bullpen is and how the whole rotation is, I think there's going to be a lot of quick hooks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because they got a couple long relievers back there. I assume DL Hall is going to make the postseason roster. I assume Joe Ross is going to make the postseason roster. Aaron Ashby, who is a starter in the like, they have some guys that can platoon and also get some innings out of.
Like, yeah, like
Also underrated Trevor McGill versus Tyler McGill series.
yeah, that is actually pretty cool. But yeah, no, I'm thinking maximum 18 batters for each of these starters.
Yeah.
Is what they're going to be facing. Yeah, like I'd be very surprised for sure. Because yeah, I mean, every starter is on a much shorter leash, no matter what. So obviously the Brewers are going to have that same case as well. Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be interesting. You can't count out either team. Obviously the Mets are hot, but I think a lot of people might not even think of the Brewers just because of how consistent they've been, and they haven't really been in the news, and they don't have a whole lot of necessarily star power, or at least household names. Mets have some guys like that, but yeah, it'll be definitely interesting to watch. And we'll get into predictions later. But anything more on the Mets Brewers series?
No, we'll get into the Padres Braves. I'll take this one since you took the other two. It's the number 4 seeded San Diego Padres and the number 5 seeded Atlanta Braves who clinched the postseason today, along with the New York Mets. These teams played each other 7 times throughout the regular season, with San Diego winning 4 out of those 7. They outscored Atlanta 26-22. So it was, all things considered, as pretty much as evenly matched as you can get. The Padres are 45-36 when they play at Petco Park. The Braves are 43-38 when they play away from Truist Park. The Padres, they've been the best team in baseball for quite some time. They have won 43 out of their last 62, giving them the best record in Major League Baseball in that span. Throughout those 62 games, their offense has put together a 773 OPS, and that is the 3rd highest in all of Major League Baseball. On the mound, they have the 3rd best ERA. They have the 2nd best FIP. And the rotation has been remarkable, for a rotation that we spent so many hours and days and years being concerned about like 2 years ago. Michael King, in his last 14 starts, by the way, this guy is in his first full year as a starter, a 2.03 ERA, a 2.64 FIP, and 80 innings pitched. Dylan Cease, one of our favorites here on ARR, a 2.46 ERA, a 2.71 FIP, and 80 and a third innings pitched, also threw a no-hitter in that span. Jackson Merrill, the likely Rookie of the Year runner-up. He played in his last 89 games, had a 932 OPS, and the 8th most FWAR in all of baseball. And Manny Machado, I assume 85 games ago is exactly when I dropped him from our FWAR league. He has an 894 OPS in his last 85 games, so he's been picking it up lately. On the Braves, they have a couple guys that struggled early this season that have really picked it up. Matt Olson, in his last 15 games, has an 1139 OPS. Michael Harris, second in his last 18, has a 1083 OPS. He is, I believe, second in the league in FWAR over that span. So, Chris, what are you most excited for about this Padres-Braves series?
I'm worried I'm gonna fall into a trap that I fell into last year. In that it's a 4-versus-5 series. It's a 4-versus-5 game. The Braves are not in exactly an ideal scenario, and I feel like I'm looking at the Braves.
I see where you're going with
Rangers
this
last year.
Yeah.
Obviously the Braves they had to play today, which none of these other playoff teams besides the Mets had to do. They had to travel across the country. They have to do that overnight and then play the Padres, who I believe are the best, out of all the teams playing in this series here. I think they're the best team among them, where I think I probably thought the Rays were the best team among that group last year, among those 8 teams that were playing the wild card series. So I'm worried I'm going to fall into a trap here and totally count out the Braves, but it's tough not to. Obviously, the news came out that Chris Sale is not going to be starting in this series, which is a major blow to the Braves. Obviously, the Braves haven't had Acuna or Austin Riley for a while. They haven't had Spencer Strider pretty much the whole year. So not having that necessarily ace star power outside of maybe Max Fried, that definitely puts them in a tough spot. And also it doesn't help that Schwellenbach started today, so he's if he's available, it's probably going to be game 3. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons to count out the Braves and totally be fully bought in on the Padres. So I'm worried I might fall into a trap there.
Yeah, I think one thing that's like a little bit of a bummer about this series, if you told me last year that in 2024 we'd be getting a Padres-Braves playoff series, I thought I'd be thinking, sweet, we're finally getting Acuna versus Soto.
Yeah, that's
and we have neither.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Yeah, no, it's also pretty interesting to view to like finally have the Braves as a wild card team.
Yeah, it's such a weird feeling. And not only that, but like having them playing wild card I'm just gonna say it, man. It should be wild card weekend. Like MLB accidentally found themselves in such a perfect playoff scenario in 2022, and they went away from it for no reason. Like wild card weekend was sick. It was dope. I liked it so much better that way. Not only that, but it set up the World Series starting on a Friday and a potential Game 7 ending on a Saturday or a Sunday rather. Like that makes more sense. I like that better.
Yeah, I think the World Series still, however it worked out, it still starts on a Friday this year.
Does it? Okay.
However,
cool. I like that.
However, yeah, and also like, I don't know, I kind of like ending the regular season in the middle of the week because
I did too.
It doesn't, obviously a lot of people are
like,
focused on football during the day on Sunday. And yeah, I think it would make those end of year moments more significant.
Yeah, how many people on teams that were out of the playoffs on Sunday were watching their city's football team instead of their other team of their baseball team's game 162?
Exactly.
Like if
Yeah.
you're I don't know, give me a team. If you're a Marlins fan, like you Dolphins
Right.
instead
Or
of watching the Marlins play the Blue Jays.
yeah, or trying to trying to think who else, because unfortunately the Dolphins were Monday night.
Okay, I don't. Yeah,
But yeah, if you were a Rangers fan, or no, the Cowboys played Thursday night. Damn it. We're so bad at this. But yeah, example there, we'll cut it in. Um, but
yeah,
uh, but yeah, it kind of goes without saying. Um, but yeah, it would be cool. I liked when that year happened, and it
yeah,
didn't, like, starting the ALDS on like a Tuesday. It seems kind of natural, like, because eventually you get some more key games on that
yeah.
weekend.
Yeah, and
And
also like
fans,
last year
yeah,
I was unemployed during the playoffs and now I have a day job and I have to miss some of the games tomorrow and I had to miss some of the games today, which is not cool. Like I don't
yeah,
love that Scuba versus Framber is happening at 2:30 on a Tuesday.
yeah. No,
Like
that's
I get it. I get it. You want to have all four games happening separately. You don't want to have too much overlap and that's fine. Start the playoffs on a Friday. It's the first day. Like come
exactly,
on.
exactly. Yeah, no, it's something to consider for sure. I'm sure they could figure
Also, like
something out.
the fact that there's no scheduled games on the first Friday of October is disgusting.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't have that.
yeah. It's very odd. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because that's the best. That was the best. 4 Game Friday was the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Now it's four
Like
game,
I mean, when I was in high
Tuesday.
school, it was a tradition where like during the last period of school, I streamed the first game. I go home and I watch baseball for what, like 8 straight hours?
Yeah, pretty
Probably more than
much.
that. Yeah, and that was
Yeah,
my Friday night.
almost. Yeah, it was the best. It was the best. Yeah, do we want to start doling out our predictions?
Let's do it.
I feel reluctant too because of how poorly I predicted the playoffs last year. But I'm just gonna go in knowing that most of them are probably gonna be wrong. Yeah, so Astros, Tigers, what do you got?
I've paraded the Tigers this entire season, and I feel awful for doing this, but I'm going Astros in two. I feel horrible for it. The Astros, like I said, they've been the best team for so long, and they have the experience, and they're inevitable. Like they've always just found a way to come out on top, no matter how likable the opponent, no matter how good the odds feel. Even when they lose at home, they go to Minnesota and they win two straight, and they blow them out in both games. Um, and yeah, I mean, you know what? If there's any team that could burst the bubble, it's the Tigers. It's AJ Hinch, and I buy that. But I just can't. First of all, you might be wondering why I'm picking them in two. I'd like to remind you that since 2020, there have been 16 of these best of three series where it's all in one location. Only three of them have gone to a third game. For some reason, all of these things just appear to be sweeps. So that's probably what I'm going to predict in most of these series. But I am going Astros in two here.
Yeah, I am joining you on that. I've got Astros in two as well. Yeah, regarding the first pitching matchup, like obviously people will look at Scooble and be like, okay, maybe Tigers might have an advantage first game. But in terms of what I like, I like Valdez versus the Detroit lineup more than I like Scooble versus the Astros lineup. And that's just kind of a testament to the differences of lineups. Like Tigers are kind of a weaker lineup, especially against lefties. Like I remember when we went to Camden Yards and Kerry Carpenter was out of the lineup and Riley Green was, hitting fourth instead of second. Like they're not in the best shape when they're facing lefties. So yeah, I think Valdez has
Yeah, I
had
mean,
just,
get Andy Ibanez to be the first at bat of the playoffs tomorrow.
yeah, exactly. Like, and
Him,
Valdez
him,
has
or him, or Wenzel Perez.
exactly, and Valdez has done really good in key games for the Astros before in the playoffs. I think Scuba will do well, but I just like the Astros offense and the Astros team as a whole a lot better than I do the Tigers. But yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily something I'm rooting for. It's just the prediction.
Yeah.
On to Orioles Royals.
You know what? I'm gonna redeem myself here. I'm gonna be nice to the Royals. I'm going Royals in two. Yeah, this seems way too much, like you mentioned, like the 2023 Rangers. Like they just the vibe is just it's too there. Like they ended off on a whimper. They're going to Baltimore. Uh, they, but I like the rotation. I like the matchups. Um, I think Cole Reagan's, in a big game on the big stage is going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, the key with him is going to be keeping him in the zone because his walks have gotten a little worse lately, and that's also kind of when he's at his worst is when he's not throwing strikes. I think a very big key to Reagan's tomorrow is going to be Matt Quantraro giving him a quick hook. Believe it or not, I know that that's not usually what you want to do with your ace, but Cole Reagan's has this tendency where he'll be late in the start trying to get like that final out and really putting the finishing touches on a good outing. And sometimes things just kind of slip away from him. I've seen it happen to him a couple of times between the end of last year and this year. And I trust that this bullpen will kind of figure it out. Guys like Will Smith, John Schreiber, Lucas Urseg. I think James McArthur's injured, but I think they'll find a way. And I'm going to go, with Royals in two.
Right. Yeah. I don't know what order the first two games will go in, but I got the Orioles in three.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it going three. Maybe it's cautious optimism that we will have some winner take all games because that would be nice. Hopefully not all sweeps like last year. But yeah, I think partially part of this is looking at how cold the Royals lineup has been, and also the fact that they've been 11 and 18 in their last 29. And maybe I'm cursed with my Royals pessimism, where I just think, oh, if they're doing bad, then that's the real version of them, and maybe the previous 133 games were not the real version of them. But I think maybe 11 and 18 is kind of closer to what their real capabilities are. Obviously, a lot can happen in a short series, and a lot of things a lot of moments can have a lot of can determine a lot. But I think the Royals have enough fight in them to get one win in this series, whether it be game one or two. But I think the Orioles are going to ultimately close it out because they just have a little bit more. And I like Brandon Hyde in these scenarios as well.
One thing that we haven't Orioles rotation behind Corbin Burns. I think that's kind of the issue that they ran into last year was what the rotation looked like in the playoffs. It was Bradish, Grayrod, Dean Kramer. This year it's going to be Burns, Zach Eflin game two, and then Kramer again, maybe Cade Povich, maybe Albert Suarez. The bullpen has been very shaky lately. I mean, they did get rid of Craig Kimbrell, but they haven't, they've been really feeling the loss of Felix Bautista this year, which you feel bad for that because obviously that they were supposed to have such a lockdown guy that they just didn't have. That's also kind of another reason why I like the Royals in this series. I know that I should have learned my lesson by now to pick series based off of starting pitching, but I just think there's such a massive advantage here. I like the idea that Lugo and Waka will be able to keep balls in the park. Reagan's as well, especially in left field. I know that most of the Orioles' good bats are left-handed, but I have a good feeling they could keep it in the park here.
Right. And it's kind of weird that we know the Orioles is such a young developing team. However, we felt better about them last year than this year, even though, a lot of new guys came up, a lot of guys developed, but just some guys didn't develop the way we expected to, or didn't have the years we expected to. And injuries also got in the way for sure. So yeah, anything more before we get into Mets Brewers?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So who do you got winning that one?
Yeah, I got another sweep in this one. I got the Mets winning in two. I'm gonna keep on with these sweeps because I think that this trend is real. The Brewers have disappointed me in the postseason far too many times for me to trust them ever again until they prove me wrong. And if this is the time that they do it, then so be it. Again, I really like, I think the Mets pitching, they got to keep it in the ballpark, and I think there's a good chance of that. I do think that the Mets just have like that homer power in them because, like I mentioned earlier, teams that out the homer their opponents usually win. Outside of a few bats in the Brewers lineup, I don't see too many major threats for home runs, which probably means that like Bryce Terang and Garrett Mitchell are both going to homer tomorrow. But the Mets, you look up and down this lineup, right? Even if he's been in a massive slump, JD Martinez is a home run threat with playoff experience. There's Pete Alonso, there's Mark Vientos, there's Lindor, there's Nimmo. There's a lot of guys in there that you feel like there's a chance that they could take you deep in that lineup. It's a hitter-friendly ballpark, like I mentioned. The Mets bullpen does give me a little bit of worries, but especially compared to the Brewers. But I think if they can get out to a big enough lead, they can figure themselves out. So I got the Mets winning this one in two.
Yeah, yeah, and I have the Mets. I have them winning in three. I think it's kind of a fairly even matchup, but I think yeah, just the Mets have more. I trust the Mets more, um, in just I guess to have guys who can come through, and win those high leverage moments or just win those general moments that win playoff games. Maybe I'm sounding a bit old school there, but yeah, I just think, and I think the energy is also there. Mets are coming off a huge win, winning one of the best regular season games of the year yesterday. I think that helps them out. Obviously, nothing analytical with that, but I think it's pretty real. So yeah, they don't have to travel too far from Atlanta to Milwaukee. A bit of a shorter flight, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. And yeah, I like the way their pitchers are trending. If you showed me the list of pitchers they'd have going, if you showed me that list like in July, I'd be like, what the heck? What's going on here? But they've got, they've done well as of late. Quintana, Peterson, Manaya, they've been doing well. Among other pitchers. So yeah, I just like what the Mets are. I like what the Mets have been bringing us the past few months more than the Brewers. And yeah, it's just it the Brewers just have like some sort of barrier right now, and that they just haven't been able to move by, whether it be 2020, 2021, or last year. So that's part of what makes that prediction hard to advance them. So I got Mets in three, you got Mets in two. What
Yes.
do you have for Padres Braves?
Yeah, I have a three-game series in this one, partially because I think both these teams are more evenly matched than people think, and also because I am begging this series to go three. I think this has the potential to be easily the most fun series in terms of star power, in terms of possible game quality. And I have the Padres winning this one in three games. I think on both sides you're going to get some good pitching performances, whether it be guys like Max Fried, whether it be guys like playoff veteran Charlie Morton, Michael King, Dylan Cease. There's a lot of fun to be had in that rotation. Both bullpens are interesting. Raisel Iglesias has been a good closer all year, but he was not good today. Robert Suarez has been a good closer, but the home run threat is always there. There's also guys like Tanner Scott, Brian Hoeing, Jason Adam, who they got at the trade deadline. Which is very exciting. Obviously, the star bats are there on both sides, whether it be Olson, whether it be Harris as of late, Albies, Ozuna on the Atlanta side, and on the San Diego side, it's Tatis, it's Machado. Profar has been excellent this year, and I think Jackson Merrill has the chance to really play that Corbin Carroll type role from 2023, where he was a monster in the early goings of the 2023 postseason against teams like the Brewers and the Dodgers. I think he could really have that potential to just go crazy in these next couple of games, and I feel like someone like that could be a huge difference maker. So I'm going with Padres in three.
Yeah, yeah. I got Padres in two. I'm just really bought in on the Padres and obviously what they've done over the last 62 games, but just, their total completeness as a team. I really like their lineup, bullpen, and starting pitching, along with their defense, which plays a role, but they're a very athletic team as well. Yeah, just there's not a lot of holes in this team. Whereas, the Braves have some holes because of some of the injury trouble they had. I mean, if it's a full health series here for the Braves, I think they may have more of an advantage, but obviously that's not happening. I with the I'm a big Max Fried guy, but I also like what Michael King and Dylan Cease I like what they have been bringing to the table, and also with King and Cease, they can both absolutely dominate a game. They can really shut down an offense for sure. Whereas Max Fried, he'll kind of nip and tuck. He'll get soft contact. He's not going to necessarily strike out 12 guys. Whereas King and Cease, they can do that, which is something I like a little bit more in the playoffs. So that's gonna be great for them, especially in a short series. And all the additions they made at the trade deadline should be able to pay off. And then yeah, their offense just looks great. Third best OPS in their last 62 games, with Jackson Merrill leading the charge. And also most of that was without Fernando Tatis Jr. And Fernando Tatis Jr. back in the lineup. He's had some postseason success before, so yeah, it's not really a diss on the Braves for me having them get swept. I just really like what the Padres are looking like heading into this postseason. So yeah, that does it for predictions. And yeah, now we will get into players to highlight. Heading into postseason edition is all the slightly alarming and how about that will be of playoff teams, whether they're playing this upcoming wild card series or if they're just playing in the division series, if their team got a bye or not. But yeah, now we will start with our Sunday, or not Sunday, Monday leading into Tuesday, September 30/October 1st, 2024 edition of Slightly Alarming Statistics. He's been barreling up the ball way less.
He's not missing bats, he's not getting the ball on the ground, and people are hitting it in the air more.
It's been so bad. He is getting a
Slightly alarming.
Yeah, that's right. For my final slightly alarming of the season, this guy is not going to be playing in the wild card series, so we'll have to wait to see him. But he was looking like a pretty good breakout candidate, and still was this season. But I mean, people were talking about him in the Rookie of the Year race, and I don't think he's unfortunately there anymore. But it is Austin Wells from the New York Yankees. Their young catching prospect was looking great for most of the season, but he didn't finish strong. From September 10th through the season, he slashed 196, 125 for a 321 OPS, a -2 weighted plus, and -0.2 F4. Among the 171 qualifiers in the span, he ranked worst in batting average, third worst in on-base percentage, the worst in slugging, worst in OPS, third worst in weighted runs created plus, and tied for 8th worst in F4. Before this span, his average exit velocity on the season was 88.1 miles per hour, and in the span, it has dropped down to 83.6 miles per hour, the 17th lowest among the 276 hitters with at least 25 batted balls in this span. 66% of his total batted balls have been either 0 degrees or lower, or 40 degrees or higher. That is the ninth highest rate on that same list. So he's been hitting a lot of balls kind of outside of not just the sweet spot, but just like any sort of relevance spot, if you will. 36.1% of his batted balls have been hit 75 miles per hour or lower. 36.1%. That is the highest rate on that same list. And lastly, before the span, 55% of his batted balls were fly balls and line drives. And in the span, that number is down to 41%. So Austin Wells, his contact has not been very good. He's making weaker contact. He's not hitting the ball in the right spot. And for that reason, he is getting a slightly alarming, my final one of the year.
Austin Wells.
Slightly alarming.
Yeah, he's definitely been struggling, which is why I also put him as a slightly alarming.
I think we did we double up on the first and last one of the year this year?
Was slightly alarming, maybe.
I don't know if it was slightly alarming, but just I think we did, didn't we? Didn't we both put Chris Bryant?
I think, I think I put Chris Bryant. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I did
Chris
too.
Bryant.
Hang on a second. I'm gonna do some digging. Actually, wait, I don't think I can.
Or
I just switch
Brewers,
emails
Mets
to how
all
about
over
that?
again.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have it. Well, we'll have to go back and watch the episode.
Yeah. But yeah, Austin Wells in his last 15 games, he's hitting 083 with a 321 OPS out of 171 qualifiers. His on-base percentage is third lowest, and average slugging and OPS are all the lowest. And out of 194 hitters with 200 plus pitches seen in the span, Austin Wells's expected batting average is the lowest. Expected slugging is fourth lowest, and expected WOBA is sixth lowest. You mentioned that drop in average exit velocity. Out of 194 hitters with 200 plus pitches seen, that average exit velocity is the ninth lowest. His line drive rate has gone from 26% to 17%. Pop-up rate has gone from 8% to 17%. And out of 253 hitters with 25 plus batted balls in the span, Austin Wells' pop-up rate is the 10th highest, top 4% in terms of hitting pop-ups, which is not where you want to be. And also his sweet spot rate in general has gone from 36% to 25%, and his hard hit sweet spot rate has gone from 20% to 11%. So from both of us, Austin Wells getting a
slightly alarming.
All right, now we go from the lows to the highs, where we will be talking players or subjects that have been outperforming their expectations with our Monday into Tuesday, September 30 into October 1st, 2024 edition of How About That?
He's striking out less, walking more, and he's also making better contact.
Turning into a strikeout machine just out of nowhere.
He's been excellent all around this year.
He is getting a
How about that?
Yeah, Chris, feel free to throw a flag on this one, because this might be a guy a little too over the edge of eligible for this kind of segment. He's a big name, but I think his performance has been awesome lately, and I think it's worth highlighting. I'm talking about Jackson Chourio.
It's acceptable, especially given that we're down to 12 teams.
All right, fair. So Jackson Chourio is acceptable. All right, so since the start of the second half, he is slashing 310, 363, 552 for a 914 OPS, a 150 weighted runs created plus, and 3.0 F4. Among the 152 hitters in this span that qualify, he ranks 10th in batting average, 14th in slugging, tied for 14th in weighted runs created plus, and tied for 10th in F4. Before this span, he had a strikeout rate of 23.3%, and in this span, it has gone down to 18.7%. Among the 158 hitters with at least 200 plate appearances in this span, Jackson Chourio ranks 9th in expected batting average as well at 302. Before this span, Chourio had a fly ball rate of 22.9%, and in this span, it is up to 26%, which isn't the highest rise that we've ever seen, but what is important is the average on his fastballs, on his fly balls, has gone from 89.4 miles per hour before the span to 94.3 miles per hour in the span. That's a 5 mile an hour increase on the exit velocity on fly balls. That makes a major difference. His barrel rate on fly balls has gone from 16.7% before the span to 28.8% in this span. His ground ball rate has also gotten a tick down from 51.2% before the span to 44.8% in this span. Also before the span, 16.7% of his batted balls were hard hit and in the sweet spot. And in this span, that number is up to 21.9%. So a 5% increase in hard hit and sweet spot percentage at the same time. Before the span, Jackson Chourio hit 248, slugged 336, and put up a 297 WOBA against all fastballs, against four seamers, against sinkers, against cutters. Going back to before the span, he had a run value on fastballs of -7. In the span, he has hit 315 against them, slugged 556, and posted a 394 WOBA. His +14 run value ranked 9th out of all hitters in the majors against fastballs. And that's such a huge thing, because fastballs are already going to see the most of, especially four-seamers. So if you can hit those to a great degree like he has been, you're going to be a good hitter as long as you're at least league average on everything else. And some of the Mets starters that we're going to see, we can expect to see some fastballs, guys like Sean Manaea, you're going to see a lot of four-seam fastballs coming to Jackson Chourio, a lot of sinkers, a lot of cutters, if he continues this span, you'll see him hitting very well against fastballs, and also hitting the ball more in the air, higher in the air, and also harder when in the air. And that's why he is at 20 years old getting a how about that.
Jackson Chourio. And yeah, we've with the eligible or not, I think I kind of maybe more concretely, as long as as long as you're not in the MLB top 100, you're I think you're good, because I just looked up all the lists and he wasn't in any top 100. So
okay.
I think he's eligible. He probably won't be eligible next year, but
awesome.
But yeah, I think he just cracks the ranks. But my how about that is coming out of Detroit. It is Tyler Holton.
Yeah.
So we're reliever diving.
Long reliever diving.
For the final how about that. he's been particularly excellent in his last 29 appearances. He has a .83 ERA and 2.43 FIP in 43 and a third innings pitched in this span. Out of 183 qualifying relievers in the span, Tyler Holton's 0.64 ERA, specifically as a reliever, is the third lowest. I say that because he started, I think, one game, as an opener, probably pitched like a 1 and a third innings. But when you go to Fangraphs, split as a reliever, it only gives you those stats. So particularly as a reliever, 0.64 ERA in his last 28 innings, I believe, as a reliever, or not 28, 42, something like that. Out of all 179 pitchers with 500 plus pitches thrown in this span, Tyler Holton's expected batting average against is 5th lowest, expected slugging against is 3rd lowest, and expected WOBA against is the lowest. This is over about a 3-month span, or 2.5 month span. His average exit velocity has gone from 87.4 miles per hour to 84.7 miles per hour. And out of 179 pitchers, Tyler Holton's average exit velocity against is the 6th lowest. Along with that, he has greatly decreased the hard fly balls against him. His barrel rate has gone from 8.2% to 1.8%. And out of 179 pitchers, Tyler Holton's barrel rate against is the 3rd lowest. Along with that, his ground ball rate has gone from 43% to 54%. Line drive rate has gone from 24% to 18%. And fly ball rate has gone from 25% to 20%. So lots of things going in the right direction for Tyler Holton. You'll probably see him out of the bullpen in Detroit, probably for multiple innings. He's a very, don't expect a lot of hard contact, a lot of hard fly balls when Tyler Holton is on the mound because, he's been excellent at preventing both over the last 2.5 months. And Tyler Holton, for that reason, getting an A. And that does it for players to highlight. It is late.
Season.
I prepared a Savant Trivia, but I don't know if we want to do that. Maybe we could save that for later.
How long do you expect it's going to take?
I don't think any longer than 10 minutes. Maybe.
I'm cool with it.
All right, yeah. So we'll do a little bit of bonus Savant Trivia, but so long to the how about that's and slightly alarmings. We did 25 each, probably 26 each. Given we had multiple in an episode or two. Pretty cool stuff. But we will finish with Baseball Savant Trivia, which is gonna take a break for at least the postseason. But my game is it's another guess a certain percentage game, using video and whatnot. This one might be pretty challenging. It is the likelihood of the caught stealing.
Oh God, I need to look at this graph more.
Yeah.
Oh no.
It might be tough.
Part of me knew, like, maybe looking at that leaderboard more, like just in case it came up in Savant Trivia, but I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how much Chris looks at that one, and I don't think he'd be too excited to play it if I did it. But all right, we're doing this.
So what I'm gonna do, they don't do it by decimals. So if you get it on the dot, if you get it on
and
the
they
dot,
determine it by like it's like the jump and like how far you are down the line when the throw is made and like stuff like that.
Yeah. So it's guess that you get two lifelines where it will give you the runner's sprint speed percentile.
Okay.
And you might be able to tell who's running already and how fast they are. So you might not need those lifelines. It'll be we'll be looking at the video. You'll get 10 points if you get it on the dot. You'll get 8 points if you're within a single digit. You'll get 7 points if you're within 5. You'll get 5 if you're within 10, and then 3 if you're within 15, 1 if you're within 20. We'll do that.
Perfect.
All right, let's find the videos. And
how many do we got?
We got 5.
Okay.
Not too many. So each each guess can really make or break the percentage. So let's I think I have it all up already. Here we go.
All right, it's in Tampa. We got, I assume that's Cal Raleigh behind the plate. Okay, that was Jose Caballero running. I assume he's pretty fast. It's a former Mariner.
Yeah, and if you want
It
to
was a curveball, right? That looked like a curveball from Kirby. Can you play that again? Is that a lifeline?
yeah, if you want to like unlimited replays on this
Okay,
one.
yeah. Yeah, that was okay. It was a slider. He looked. Oh, we did get him. But the throw was like to the left of the bag, which is more beneficial. I feel like this one had a pretty decent of the runner being safe. I'm gonna go like 30% on the percent that they get caught stealing.
It ended up being 58%.
Oh God.
Oh
no. I have no basis to go off of because usually like with like expected batting average and stuff like that, like I know I've seen enough of it to know where I know what it looks like generally. I have nothing to go off of here in terms of prior experience.
I don't think I'd do very well on this one. But yeah, that was Mitch Garver who nailed Jose Caballero.
Yeah.
On to the second one, where we're gonna share sound.
58%. Damn. This might be like the most embarrassing performance that anyone puts up. All right. Oh, it's more Mariners.
Yep.
This is very early in the season. I assume that's Raleigh. Maybe it's not. Another curveball. Gets him on a nice throw. That one seems like it's a lower percent. I couldn't tell who was running. Was that Rafaela? I couldn't get a great view of it.
You can use a lifeline for the sprint speed percentile.
I'm gonna bypass it. I'm gonna go. Honestly, I'm gonna stick with my last guess. I'm gonna go 30% again.
30%. What was it? It was 26%.
All right.
That is gonna give you 7 points.
There we go. We're on the board.
Within 5.
We're on the board.
Wait. My volume down?
No, you're good.
Give me a weird signal.
I hear you perfectly fine. Oh yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, that's weird. So yeah, 26%. You were within, that was within 4, so that is going to be 7 points.
Awesome.
Yeah, now you're on the board. That's a very good guess. All right. Let's pull up number 3.
All right, can't wait to see more Mariners. Cal Raleigh.
It's
It'd be very funny if it's just all Cal Raleigh.
Yeah, I pull in like Miguel Olivo or something. Like, how did he get on this?
All right, looks like this is Pat Bailey, my
Mason
guy.
Witt doubled to start. Now Pages takes off. He's going to steal a base.
Oh, okay. He looked like he was there. I want to watch that one again though. Logan Webb, so definitely
Mason
not a
Witt
fastball.
doubled to start. Now Pages takes off. He's going to steal a base.
On my screen, it's a bit laggy. Pedro Pajes is like, I think, a pretty decent runner. That was a curveball. Pat Bailey made a good throw, but it was offline. I think this one was pretty likely. I'm going to go 75%.
75% for a stolen base.
For a stolen base. So 25% for a caught stealing.
Yeah, that was 4%.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That one looks not very likely. I should have gone lower.
Yeah, it was.
I sometimes I forget that they give you like some basically impossible ones on that.
Right.
Yeah, on that graph.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that one looked like it was tough.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and on to here. Let me pull up the fourth one. X out of the third one. All right, on to number 4.
Honored that way. I don't know what it is.
And a lot of Ranger fans made the trip to Cooperstown.
Oh, come on. You gotta get that. I mean, that's got to be somewhere north of 90%. I'm going to go 95.
That was 71%.
Really?
Yeah.
He had it by a mile.
I don't know. I don't know where they come up with this stuff. These numbers, I don't know.
All right. I thought that one was like a gimme.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in that world it is 71% is considered a gimme. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. All right. Well, give me the lifeline on this last one, just because I still have it.
Yeah, it's gonna be a 98th percentile sprint speed.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. What's Jacob Young doing on the base paths?
Luka takes off, swing and a miss, throw down, and they got him.
Wow.
They actually ruled him safe on the replay.
Okay, I did not know Johnny DeLuca was like that. I want to see that one again. So Simeon Woods Richardson. Twins, so it is a fastball pitcher, and that was a fastball. That one looked like it was tough. I'm gonna go 15% for a caught stealing.
It ended up being 40%.
Damn. Well, I won on one of them.
You did get very close on one of them.
Yeah,
it was a tough.
I'll take that as a win because that is a tough graph.
That's a tough game.
That I'm not super familiar with. Maybe that's an off-season project.
Yeah, no, and I know you test play. I usually don't test play myself, so maybe if I had test played, I would have switched up. But yeah, I figured it would be tough.
I can't wait for just the way that this game evolves in like 3 years, where it's like, all right, guess the horizontal movement.
Yeah, yeah. That's looking like more of a 22.6. It's actually 22.8. Damn, no points on that.
No points.
Yeah, that'll be funny.
Yeah, one day we'll get to that point.
All right, but yeah, no, a wonderful long extravaganza.
Yeah, a marathon ARR for number 326.
Yes, for sure. Thank you to Mark Simon for joining the show.
Yes, as always.
He did it at what was a convenient time for us, which is not a convenient time for many. We recorded at 10 p.m. on a Thursday night. So shout out to him for adjusting, as I had some flukos to cover. Shout out to Flavanna County football. But yeah, thank you to Mark Simon. If you want to follow us on social media, follow me on Twitter at Chris_Giannis. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran. Also subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check out all those videos I just put on the screen. Check out the guest playlist in which Mark Simon is going to be featured on for a fourth time. Yeah, check out all the episodes with Mark Simon in there. The 2021 appearance was very good. He gave a great explanation of what defensive runs saved were, and it was talked some old school baseball. It was great to have that experience back 3 years ago now. That was a very good interview. So at the very least, listen to that one. Also, follow us on social media, as I just said. That does it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be recapping the Wild Card Series and previewing the LDSs. We will see you then.
This conversation is over.